This is Audible.
Old Loves Die Hard, a Mac Faraday mystery, written by Lauren Carr, narrated by James C. Lewis. Prologue. Georgetown, District of Columbia, 3 years ago. Does heavy rain affect the murder rate the same way a full moon does? Squinting through the rain flowing down his windshield like a waterfall, Lieutenant Mac Faraday pondered this question while easing his sedan around the emergency vehicles surrounding an SUV in the downtown parking lot. Mac hoped the patrolman in the yellow rain parka flagging him down wouldn't comment on his car's grinding brakes. Payday was Friday. Then he could replace the brake pads. With his luck, the pads would wear down to the rotors first. "What have we got?" Mac blinked against the raindrops splashing onto his face and into his blue eyes, while calling out the window. "Looks like a robbery gone bad, Lieutenant," the officer reported. "One shot behind the ear through the driver's side window. Wallet and watch are missing." "M.E. here yet?" "Not yet," the officer said. "Everybody is taking their sweet time hoping the rain will stop." "Either that or they know something we don't and they're gathering the animals." Before Mac could wind up his window, the officer cleared his throat. Lieutenant." "Yes?" "You should get your brakes checked. They're grinding." "I'll do that," the detective replied. "Thanks for telling me." After parking between two patrol cars, Mac climbed out of his car and pulled the collar of his raincoat tight around his neck, a moment too late. His auburn hair clung to his scalp while cold, heavy raindrops formed a watery path down the sides of his head and the back of his neck to send a shiver down his spine. The forensics team parted when Mac jogged up to where they were searching the inside of a dark blue SUV that looked black under the storm clouds. The only one who didn't move out of his way was the lifeless body slumped over the center console. The shattered glass from the window resembled a sequined baby blanket where it covered his black trench coat. Except for the stream of blood that flowed down from the hole behind his left ear, Mac guessed that in life he'd been a good-looking fellow. His black hair had been neatly trimmed. Judging from his buffed fingernails, he'd been meticulous about his grooming. The parking lot belonged to a 6-story red brick office building. In a previous life, it had been an 80-year-old tenement. After forcing out the neighborhood unfortunates, a group of entrepreneurs renovated the building to house judges and lawyers in posh office suites. Mac asked, "Anybody know who he is?" "Dillon Booth." From behind his back, Mac heard one of the uniformed officers answer. He'd been first on the scene. "He worked for Judge Randolph Daniels on the top floor. He was an intern." "He was going to graduate from law school this spring," another voice came from behind the officer. Drenched to the bones by the storm, a gray-haired man with a worn, wrinkled face stepped up to the detective. He wore a light jacket over his security guard's uniform. Searching for reasons someone would want to kill the law student, Mac asked, "Would I be correct in assuming he wasn't working on a criminal case?" "Nah," the guard responded. "He did mostly research and stuff for Judge Daniels. He worked hard." Noting it was Saturday, he went on. "He came in bright and early this morning, left about 2 o'clock. He signed out at 1:58, said he was going to finish up at home." From where he stood, the guard glanced into the back of the vehicle. "Hey, did you find a box?" "Box?" Mac glanced over his shoulder at the forensics officer to see that they were also puzzled by the question. "A document box." The guard held out his hands a couple of feet apart. "You know, the kind you carry file folders in. When he left, he was carrying one. I could tell by the way he was carrying it was heavy. He must have had it full." The uniformed officers and forensics team responded in unison with shakes of their heads to the inquiry about the box. "You have any idea what he had in it?" Mac asked. It was the guard's turn to shake his head. "I assumed case files, being that he worked for the judge and all." "What about his computer case?" "No laptop or case," an officer within hearing distance reported. Mac summarized. "Looks like we have a missing laptop, watch, wallet, and mystery box. Very interesting." He turned to the officers inside the SUV. "Did the killer leave anything behind?" "He missed his cell phone." Like a prize, a young officer held up the phone encased in a plastic bag. Mac examined the instrument, which contained so many features that he had trouble determining which button to push in order to find the call log. Seeing his problem, one of the forensics officers took it and pressed a couple of buttons until he found the log. "What's the last call he made?" asked Mac. The officer read off the number. "You made the call this afternoon at 1:52. Didn't the guard say he signed out at 1:58? Mac noted. "Then he made his last call right before he left. And he was shot shortly after 2. While the number was being read off, Mac dialed it into his cell phone. "Let's see who the last person he spoke to happens to be." He pressed the phone to his ear. After 4 rings, the voicemail system picked up. "You have reached the office of the Assistant U.S. Attorney, Stephen McGuire." Chapter 1. Spencer Manor, Spencer, Maryland, present day. "Are you ready for a break?" Mac Faraday heard Archie call out before she came into view. The multicolored leaves of the trees off Spencer Manor's deck concealed her approach. A half-dozen lake houses, growing in size and grandeur, rested along Spencer Court, which ran the length of Spencer Point. The court ended at the stone pillars marking the entrance to Mac Faraday's multi-million-dollar estate on Deep Creek Lake. 6 months earlier, Mac had inherited the stone and cedar home from Robin Spencer. The world-famous mystery writer's sudden death from a brain aneurysm had revealed the secret that 47 years earlier, as a teenager, she had given birth to a baby boy who had been put up for adoption. Her baby boy grew up to become a homicide detective named Mac Faraday. Marking his place with his forefinger before closing the book he was reading, Mac welcomed the opportunity for a cocktail before dinner. When he saw Archie jog up the steps leading down to her cottage, tucked in the corner of the rose garden, he realized that he'd been waiting for her all afternoon. Archie Monday was in faded jeans and a rose-colored cashmere sweater that fit her slender figure like a glove. With her short blonde hair and bare feet with nails painted in rose-colored polish, she looked like a sensuous fairy dispatched to spread red, yellow, and gold pixie dust on the leaves surrounding the manor. Mac had felt like the luckiest man in the world when he discovered that his inheritance included a beautiful woman living in the stone cottage at the end of his back deck. Archie had been Robin Spencer's editor, researcher, and personal assistant for over 10 years. When the author passed away, she'd left Archie the guest cottage to live in for as long as she wanted. The cottage and a generous allowance from a trust fund afforded Archie the freedom to take on freelance editorial assignments at her choosing. With a decade of being the right-hand lady to one of the world's most successful novelists on her resume, she had her pick of only the juiciest assignments. This week she was editing and proofing the last installment of a popular thriller trilogy. The second book in the series, which had been released the month before, ended in a cliffhanger. Now the public was clamoring for the conclusion. With the author and her agent breathing down the editor's neck to meet the publisher's deadline, and hackers lurking on the internet to find out who had the final manuscript in order to leak the ending, Archie had been locked up in her cottage, glued to her laptop, 18 hours a day. "I need air and an exquisite glass of wine." She dropped down into the chaise across from him. "I have just the thing for you." Trying not to look like he'd been waiting for her, Mac casually strolled inside to the kitchen, where he had been chilling a bottle of wine that matched her order, and had a serving tray with glasses and shrimp cocktails waiting. "You think you're going to meet your deadline?" "I always meet my deadlines," she called back. "That's why everybody loves me." Her face lit up when he came out carrying the tray, loaded with everything she wanted for her break, only for her expression to change to horror when Gnarly, the 100-pound German shepherd that was another part of Mac's inheritance, tore around the corner of the house and raced for the open door. The dog cut so close to Mac's legs while darting inside that it was only due to some fancy footwork that he kept from dropping everything onto the deck. What was that all about? Recalling she'd seen a large bone sticking out of Gnarly's mouth, she asked, "Where did he get that bone?" Too preoccupied with not spilling the Pinot Grigio to notice anything other than a furry blur that almost clipped his legs, Mac set the tray on the table. "I'm afraid to find out." "Where's he been all day?" "I don't know," he replied. "It's impossible to contain that dog. He's smart, he's determined, and innovative. I've actually seen him studying me to determine how best to get around me." He pulled the cork out of the bottle and poured her a taste of the wine. "It's downright creepy." She went over to the door and looked for where Gnarly had gone inside. She saw him burying something under the cushion in the love seat in the living room. "Mac, we don't want the neighbors to get mad at us again." "I'm trying to keep him entertained. I walk him twice a day." Offering a glass of white wine, he went over to her. "Why did he look so guilty when he went running into the house to hide?" "If we're lucky, we'll never find out." They clinked their glasses together in a toast just as Spencer's chief of police, David O'Callahan, turned the corner to come around from the front of the manor. After giving birth to her son, Mac's teenage mother had been sent off to college to end her relationship with Patrick O'Callahan. By the time she'd returned to Spencer, Mac's birth father had married and had a son. David followed in his late father's footsteps to become the chief of police. Mac had learned from his mother's journal that over the years, Robin had come to love David like a son, to the point of providing a trust fund to care for his elderly mother, the woman who happened to marry the love of her life. "Well, if it isn't Spencer's finest," Mac called out. Without a word, Archie fetched a third wine-glass. David's attention wasn't on Mac and his greeting so much as it was on Gnarly, who was bellying out onto the deck to hide behind Mac's legs. "There you are, you canine thief." "What did he do?" Mac wanted to know. "I got a call from the market in town." "What town?" The closest market Mac knew of was across the bridge in McHenry, which is over 3 miles away. "McHenry," David answered. 45 minutes ago, someone walked into the market, went to the pet department, selected a large rawhide bone valued at $8, and walked out the front door without paying for it." Aware of the wet snout pressed against his ankle, Mac pointed out, "McHenry isn't in your jurisdiction." "But your perp lives in my jurisdiction," David argued. 3½ feet tall, 100 pounds, black, brown, and bronze hair, brown eyes, and of German descent. We have 3 eyewitnesses who swear they'll be able to pick Gnarly out of a lineup." Archie was doubtful. "He walked in, took a bone, and walked back out with it." "How?" Mac asked. David answered. "Automatic doors." Mac pointed out. "But the pet department is all the way in the back." "Yeah. They said he actually nosed through the inventory to pick just the one he wanted." "Why didn't anybody stop him?" "By the time the manager and the clerks got over their stunned disbelief, Gnarly was long gone." David pointed his finger at the shepherd hiding his face against the back of Mac's legs. "You need to do something about your klepto dog." Before Mac could respond, Gnarly jumped to his feet, went on point, and barked to signal the arrival of a visitor. As if on cue, the doorbell sounded. "We have visitors," Archie said. "Probably the FBI to pick up Gnarly for robbing the Bank of America," David said. Grateful for the interruption, Mac went inside. From the back deck, he had to cross the dining room, up 3 steps, and across the living area to the front foyer. Months after his windfall, he still had to get used to the vastness of the inheritance. The granite floors, antiques passed down through generations, authentic paintings, including a Monet, leather furniture, stone fireplaces in each room, they were all his. He was still in awe of the painting above the fireplace mantel of Mickey Forsythe, Robin Spencer's chief detective. The image was that of a man dressed in stylishly casual clothes, sitting in a wing-back leather chair. Gray touched the temples of his auburn hair. His facial features included chiseled cheekbones and a strong jaw. His blue eyes seemed to jump out of the painting. Mickey's German shepherd sat at attention by his side. Mac wasn't the only one who'd noticed the similarities between Robin Spencer's fictional detective and her long-lost son. Like Mac, Mickey was a homicide detective when he came into a multi-million-dollar inheritance. Retired from police work, he spent his time solving murder mysteries with Diablo, his faithful canine companion. Sometimes the painting over the fireplace would make the hair on the back of Mac's neck stand up, so much so that he'd considered sending it up to the Spencer Inn on the top of Spencer Mountain to hang in the lobby across from Robin's portrait. Mac sensed that Gnarly followed him more in need of his protection from the authorities than to protect his master from any potential danger that might be waiting on the other side of the door. As they passed the love seat in the living room, Gnarly, who had taken ownership of the chair, jumped up and peered over the back of it to the foyer. Through the beveled cut glass in the door, Mac could make out a woman smoothing her hair and straightening her clothes in anticipation of his greeting her. A forced grin filled her face as soon as her eyes met his. "Mac!" she sang out, as if no time had passed since their last meeting in divorce court, when the judge had ended their 20-year marriage with a single pound of a gavel. The year before that, she'd thrown him out of their home. Feeling as stunned as the market manager when Gnarly walked in and walked out with the stolen goody, Mac uttered her name in two disjointed squawks. Christine. After staring at her long enough to determine that her presence on his doorstep wasn't a nightmare from his imagination, he asked, "What are you doing here?" "I decided to come out for a visit." When she craned her neck to see behind him into the manor, he caught a whiff of the alcohol on her breath. She was wrapped in her decade-old blue trench coat. Under that, Mac saw she wore blue jeans over white athletic shoes. She had to be curious about what he'd inherited on the day their divorce had become final. Out of spite, he wanted to tell her to ask their two children, both college students, who had inherited large trust funds from their grandmother for their education. Since the home she had won in their divorce was over 3 hours away, she had to have driven quite a way to see what would have been hers if she'd only stayed married to him for just a little while longer. Mac gave in to his manners. "You want to come in?" As if she feared he would change his mind, she hurried across the threshold into the foyer. "You look good. You're tanner than usual. Have you been using a tanning booth or some of those lotions?" Showing her into the living room, Mac replied that he spent a lot of time outside. "Golf?" "Tennis. I play twice a week." He wondered if he should return her compliment by saying how good she looked. Catching his reflection in the mirror in the corner curio containing glass artifacts Robin had purchased during a trip to China, he had to admit that he did look good. The regular tennis games with Garrett County's prosecuting attorney, Ben Fleming, had kept him trim and fit, even if he did lose the majority of their matches. She wasn't paying much attention to him. Her blue eyes, rimmed in red and framed with dark, swollen circles, gazed up at the beams in the 2-story foyer and living room. Her mouth hung in awe at the discovery of each new treasure that she had missed out on. "What are you doing here, Christine?" He decided to skip the vacant compliment about her looking good to go straight for the heart. Her eyes filled with tears and spilled down her cheeks. "I screwed up." "I know," Mac said. "You didn't need to drive all the way out here to Spencer to tell me that." Wailing, she buried her face in her hands. Behind her, Gnarly watched while sitting up in the love seat with his front paws resting on top of the back. When her cry rose to a loud shriek, he buried his face in his paws. "Mac, what is going on?" Archie rushed in from the back deck with David close in behind her. The two women met each other's gaze. Christine asked first, "Is this Archie?" As if she didn't know the answer, Archie looked at Mac. "Yes." Standing up straight, Mac crossed over to stand next to her. "This is R.C. Monday. She lives in the guest cottage." He went on to introduce David. "David O'Callahan, our chief of police. He's a good friend of mine. He came to ask for my help in solving a robbery that happened in town today. "Our children told me a lot about you," she told them. "I'm Christine. I'm sure Mac told you a lot about me." "Not really," Archie replied quickly. As if to remind Mac that he'd forgotten someone during his introduction, Gnarly let out a loud whine. Startled by the noise behind her, Christine whirled around. Spying the German shepherd filling the love seat and almost at eye level with her, she announced, "That's the dog." "That's Gnarly," Mac said. Eyeing Gnarly with a mixture of fear and curiosity, Christine stayed rooted in the middle of the living room without moving toward him. Gnarly was equally ambivalent about her. "Did you drive out here alone?" Mac wondered how she'd managed to drive in her inebriated condition without being pulled over by the police. "Yes," she mumbled. "Where's Stephen?" At the mention of the name of the man for whom she had divorced him, she burst into hysterical cries again. "I'm so sorry, Mac. Please forgive me. Please let me have another chance. After all we had been through together." Suddenly she was on her knees, with both arms wrapped around his legs, while sobbing into his thighs. David snatched his keys from his pocket. Announcing that he had reports to finish at the police station, he hurried past them. "But what about the robbery at the market?" Mac called out. "I'll pay off the manager." David was out the door and gone. Mac didn't know whether to ask Archie for help or not. She answered for him. "I have a tight deadline." She galloped out to the deck to head down to her cottage. When Christine began choking on her sobs, Gnarly dug his stolen bone from out under the cushion and leaped over the back of the love seat to follow after Archie. "Get up, Christine." Mac pulled her up to her feet by her armpits and dragged her over to the sofa. Her tears had glued strands of her golden blonde hair to her wet cheeks. Mac recalled a time as recently as the day he had come home to find his belongings packed up in the garage that she would never have left home without each hair being in place. "Stephen left you, didn't he?" "We did have a good marriage," she choked out. "If I hadn't made that one mistake." Clasping her arms around his neck, she tried to kiss him. While diving backward to dodge her lips, he released her hold on his neck. "You threw me out of my own home." He folded her hands in her lap. "You were always such a good, gentle man." Each word came out slowly and deliberately in her effort to appear in control. "Funny," Mac said. "That's not what your lawyer told the judge." "Stephen told him to say that." Her tears fell anew. "If he hadn't seduced me, he made me all those promises and told me how you didn't treat me right and how I deserved so much better than our little house in the suburbs with its little lawn, and he said that I deserved so much more and that he could give it all to me because I deserved more." Batting her tears out of her eyes, she waved her hands and glanced at the elegance surrounding her in the manor. "Like this." "McGuire certainly thought that what we had was good enough to take away from me and move into," Mac noted. "What about your job?" "Oh, you want to rub my nose in it, don't you?" she spat out. "Tristan told you." She guessed which of the two children had spilled the beans about her losing her job due to her alcoholic state. "You got laid off," Mac stated. She corrected him. "Fired." "You'd been with Robertson and Sons for over 15 years, Mac said. "You were head of the paralegal team. What happened?" "It was political." "What did they say?" "The complaint was absenteeism," she rushed on. "I had leave saved up, and then they started complaining because I'd have a few drinks at lunch, like I'm the only one to have 2 martini lunches." Mac asked her, "How much have you had to drink today?" She glanced over his shoulder at the bottle of wine on the back deck. "You first." "That was my first drink of the day, and I didn't drive over the mountains after drinking it." He asked her again. "How many glasses of wine did you have before you decided to come out here looking for me?" "Everyone needs some liquid courage before begging for mercy." She reached for his hands. "Forgive me." "I forgive you." Mac pulled his hands away. "I can do that. I moved on. If you need my forgiveness in order to move on with your life after all that's happened, then I can give it to you." She tried to make her smile as becoming as possible in her condition. "What about us?" "There is no us, Christine." "You can't abandon me like this, Mac," she cried. "I've lost everything. I've got nothing. When Stephen left—" She broke into heavy sobs. "Oh, Mac!" She collapsed into his lap. Seeing that Christine was unfit to drive, Mac grabbed her suitcase from the back seat of her 5-year-old Mercedes and drove her in his car to the Spencer Inn, another part of his inheritance, so she could sleep it off. The resort rested at the top of Spencer Mountain. The front of the stone and cedar main lodge offered a view of the lake below and the mountains off in the distance, while resting between boating, golf, skiing, mountain biking, hiking, or any of the other host of activities, guests could enjoy the view in cane rocking chairs on the wraparound porch. Between activities, they could partake of refreshments in the outdoor cafe on the multi-level deck among the flora of an elaborate living maze, or, if the weather was too chilly, the lounge inside. For more formal eating, the inn's 5-star restaurant offered dining experiences that had been favorably recorded in gourmet magazines for decades. Mac was still trying to wrap his head around owning a resort that he couldn't have afforded to visit a year ago. Even with all the twists and turns driving up to the top of the mountain from Spencer Point, Christine had managed to fall asleep in the passenger seat of his Dodge Viper. When the valet opened the door to help her out, she almost fell onto the red carpet leading up to the steps to the main entrance. With the bellhop in tow carrying her suitcase, Mac led Christine across the lobby to the front desk. Seeing the inn filled with guests, some resting in front of the fireplace, others reading in front of the waterfall fountain on the other side of the lobby, and a large group going into the lounge for cocktails, Mac worried that no rooms would be available. When the desk clerk asked if he wanted to check Christine into his private penthouse suite, he replied, "I have a private suite?" Mac's reaction amused the clerk. "On the top floor. We never book it. It's available only for you and your private guests." Mac turned around. The guests that littered the lobby now resembled money in a coin jar. They were paying guests, paying to stay at his resort, the resort he owned. It hit Mac as it had been hitting him time and again. This all belonged to him. A wail snapped him out of his daze. Realizing that Christine was no longer at his side, Mac whirled around. Her shoulder bag held up to strike, Christine had run across the lobby toward the lounge. Even with the target's back to him, Mac recognized his broad shoulders, dark hair, each strand in place, and sophisticated demeanor. With the grace of a ninja, he raised his arm to block her blow while grabbing her bag with the other to prevent a second strike. "What are you doing here?" Stephen McGuire demanded to know. His tone suggested he found the Spencer Inn permitting such low class through its doors offensive. "Who is she?" Christine shoved him out of her way to get to the woman by his side. Younger than any other woman that Mac had seen in Stephen McGuire's company, Christine's rival was as slender as his ex-wife had been in her youth. Her silky, copper-colored hair and porcelain skin only further enraged Christine. Who she is irrelevant. Stephen McGuire made no move to protect his companion when Christine charged. The girl's eyes widened, like those of a deer about to be struck by a speeding vehicle. Crying out for help, she dove to hide behind him. Mac grabbed his ex-wife while trying to disarm her. They're not worth it. Christine danced around her ex-husband to get at the other woman. "Who do you think you are?" "What's up with you, bitch?" the girl replied. The commotion had drawn Jeff Ingle, a willowy man in a gray suit that matched his slicked-back hair, from his corner office down a hallway that led back to the business offices. The inn's manager jumped in to reinforce the blockade to protect the girl. "Madam, if you don't quiet down, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "If you know what's good for you, then I suggest you leave now," Christine raged. "I'm going to kill you." "You're crazy," she turned to Stephen. "Who is she?" "Some drunken lunatic," Christine's former lover replied. "Lunatic!" Christine shouted. "Stop it, please." Mac reached out to grab her arm, which she jerked away so hard that he had to duck to avoid being slapped. "Who drove me to lunacy? You, like you have every other woman who's crossed your path." Leading his companion away by the arm, Stephen McGuire left the conversation and the lobby. When Mac and Jeff Ingle forcibly kept Christine from following, her rage reached hysterical heights. "Don't you walk away from me, Stephen. You won't get away with this. I'm not going to let you get away with this. Do you hear me? I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you, Stephen McGuire. I'm going to kill you dead." "Shut up." Mac cut off her madness with a slap across her face. Startled by the assault, Christine yelped and grabbed her cheek. Mac." Jeff noticed the guest staring dumbfounded at the scene. "What is wrong with you?" Any sympathy that Mac had had for his ex-wife earlier was now gone. Jeff Ingle gestured to the desk clerk. "Make sure a bottle of champagne and fruit tray is delivered to Mr. McGuire's room with a note of apology." "Why are you apologizing to him?" Christine demanded to know. "You attacked him," Mac said. "He's a guest at my inn, and you attacked him." "You don't know who that was, do you?" Jeff asked both of them. That was one of the McGuires. Tycoon Broderick McGuire, Supreme Court Justice Everett McGuire, the Social Register. "I'm very familiar with all the power and influence of the D.C. McGuires," Mac recounted in a mocking tone. "One call and I can have you wiped out and licking the curb." He shot a glare at Christine. "Heard the threat and experienced it." Wiping his sweaty brow with the handkerchief that he carried and often used, Jeff said, "Let's hope Mr. McGuire doesn't decide to take down the Spencer Inn by telling his friends about this incident and suggesting they start going to the Wisp for the season instead." Grabbing Christine's suitcase, the manager ushered them into an elevator to take them to the top floor. As part of the hotel security, the elevator wouldn't take them up to the penthouse floor until Mac held his personal inn key card to the I-beam for it to read the security code. The elevator would only take registered guests and hotel employees to floors containing guest rooms and suites. Guests expecting visitors not staying at the inn had to notify the front desk, which would issue the visitor a temporary key card. There was no shortage of other facilities at the inn that visitors not staying overnight could enjoy, like the conference facility, award-winning spa and restaurant and lounge on the first 3 floors of the inn. The elevator would allow guests without key cards access to those areas. As the elevator took them up, Mac ordered Christine, "Stay in the suite. Order whatever you want from room service for dinner and get some sleep. I'll come by for breakfast in the morning, and we'll talk about how to fix things." "Stephen McGuire ruined everything in my life." She blinked the tears out of her eyes. When the doors opened, they stepped down the corridor that ran the length of the top floor to the service elevator and stairwell at the other end. Jeff warned Christine about using the stairwell. "Don't go in without your key card. Once you get into the stairwell, none of the doors to any of the floors will open without your key card, except the doors to the main areas down on the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd floor. We've had more than one guest go into the stairwell in their bathrobe, or less, and have to traipse through the lobby to the front desk to get back into their room." With pride, Jeff said that every penthouse suite, except Mac's, had been reserved for that weekend. "It's the height of the autumn foliage, and the inn has the most beautiful views of the colors across the mountains and around the lake. This will be our biggest weekend until ski season starts in about 6 weeks. He gestured at the door across from Mac's suite. "This weekend we have an ambassador from Eastern Europe staying here. He says he's never seen the autumn foliage before." Mac recalled before the dissolving of their marriage when Christine would have gushed over the elegance of the 2-bedroom suite that afforded a view of the lake and wooded trails leading down to the water's edge. There was a time she would have thrown off her clothes and jumped into the hot tub out on the balcony before curling up with glee in front of the fireplace. Instead, she miserably gazed out the picture windows at the multicolored landscape without seeing it, while mumbling thanks to Jeff when he handed her the key card. After the manager left, Mac got her attention. "I'm going now. Like I said, enjoy the suite. Order dinner, stay here, and stay away from Stephen McGuire. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We'll have breakfast and discuss how we can get you back on your feet again then." "It's not supposed to be like this." She stomped her feet. "My life has gone to hell." "Then get out of hell," he said. "You're a big girl. You've made some dumb mistakes. We all make mistakes. Do what a grown-up does. Fix it. You crawled into bed with a snake and got bit. Learn from it and make it right." Christine returned to gazing out the window. "You're right, Mac," she said in a strangely quiet tone. "That's what I have to do." Chapter 2. Mac knew in his heart that his Saturday night had to be better than Christine's. He was positive that his Sunday morning would be less traumatic due to the absence of a hangover. Still, this knowledge didn't console him any when he returned to the Spencer Manor to find a note taped to Archie's cottage door. "My dearest Mac, gone out to visit an old friend. See you tomorrow. Love, Archie." It was a defining moment. It was when Archie wasn't there that Mac came to realize how much he'd come to depend on her company. In the 5 months since he'd moved to Spencer, they had spent every Saturday night together, as well as most other evenings and days. Many evenings they would go to the Spencer Inn for a dinner prepared especially for them by the chef, who delighted in treating Archie to new exotic recipes from faraway lands. Having been Robin Spencer's travel companion around the globe, Archie was fearless when it came to trying strange and unusual foods. Her adventurous taste buds delighted the inn's chef. Other times, Archie would work her own culinary magic in the Manor's gourmet kitchen and had taught Mac a few simple tricks in an effort to teach him how to cook. After dinner, they would either sit together on the deck to watch the sunset or in the hot tub on cool evenings, or watch a movie together in the home theater. Afterwards, they would say good night with a hug and a kiss, at which point Archie would return to her cottage while Mac escorted Gnarly up to the master suite. Tonight, Archie wasn't there. Mac was spending Saturday night in the Manor alone, unless he counted Gnarly. Missing her companionship also, the dog opted for drowning his sorrows in a bag of popcorn. The man and his dog stayed up late into the night watching a horror movie in the home theater. The feature about a war between werewolves and vampires was already on when Mac arrived home to find Gnarly with an open bag of popcorn, which he'd stolen off the kitchen counter. Mac rooted for the vampires, while Gnarly howled his allegiance to the werewolves. The triumph of the vampires over the werewolves was a hollow victory without Archie sitting next to him, covering her eyes during the gory parts, or better yet, burying her whole face against his chest while he held her, at which point the scent of her perfume would excite his senses. Funny how you don't notice how much someone's scent excites you until it's replaced by dog breath. The next morning, Mac woke up on the sofa when Gnarly alternated between licking his nose and pawing at his hand. The two of them had been up so late that Gnarly missed his 6 o'clock morning patrol at the point. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, Mac dragged himself up the stairs with one hand on the banister, while Gnarly guided him with the other, till they made their way to the deck's doors, where the dog suddenly jumped on the doors with both front paws pounding. His urgent barking seemed to bounce inside of Mac's head like a ping-pong ball. "What's your problem?" he demanded to know. But Gnarly wasn't sticking around to answer. As soon as the door was open, he shot out like a bullet, across the deck, down the steps, and round the corner of the house. His barking sounded like a battle charge. The bright morning sunlight momentarily blinded Mac, while at the same time the chilling autumn breeze that swept in off the lake sent a shock through his body that woke up any part of him that hadn't been awakened by Gnarly's barking. Archie was his first vision of the day. As always, she was barefoot, with her toes dressed up in bright red polish that matched her floor-length silky bathrobe. "Rough night?" she asked him. "What's his problem?" Mac asked. "It's not his fault. Otis keeps provoking him." "Who's Otis?" Mac looked around off the deck in search of another dog. Gnarly's barking could now be heard at the front of the house. "Oh, that big fat squirrel," she answered. "You can't miss him. He's the biggest squirrel in the point. Otis keeps coming up onto the deck and shaking his fat butt with his bushy tail at Gnarly. He's begging for a fight." Though he could see that she was serious in her version of the war between the dog and squirrel, Mac couldn't help being amused. It sounded like an animated movie. To him it was simple. Gnarly was territorial and couldn't stop barking at everything that moved on the point. "That squirrel actually has a name?" he asked. "Everybody has to have a name." Usually she would come in and they would share a cup of coffee. If he was lucky, she would prepare breakfast. This morning she made no such movement. Instead, she gazed at him with emerald eyes that didn't look angry, but sad. Mac wondered, as he often did with women, if he'd done something to offend her. Maybe he hurt her feelings when he laughed about Gnarly and Otis. "I'm surprised Gnarly's barking didn't wake Christine up," she said. "Why would it? What makes—" "Christine's car. It's still in the driveway. Archie must have seen it when she came home." He asked, "Do you think Christine spent the night here?" "Yeah?" "No, no." Taking her hand, he led her inside. "Want some coffee?" In his haste to get breakfast, Gnarly plowed into her, causing her to fall against Mac when the three of them squeezed through the open door. While he fed Gnarly, she prepared the coffee maker and pressed the button to grind the beans and brew a pot of coffee for the two of them. After Mac told her about the scene that Christine had caused in the lobby of the Spencer Inn, she asked, "Why did you take her up to the inn instead of letting her stay here? It isn't like you don't have enough room." She collected the cream and sugar for their coffee. "Would you have wanted her to stay here?" After Gnarly attacked the food in his bowl, Mac took 2 mugs from the cupboard. He paused to watch her reaction. "Spencer Manor is your home. You can let whoever you want to stay here." Those beautiful emerald saucers seemed to bore into him. "I asked if you wanted her to stay here." Each one dared the other to say what was on his or her mind. The only sounds in the kitchen were the churning of the coffee maker and Gnarly devouring his breakfast. When he was finished, the German shepherd sat between the two of them and licked his chops, while looking from one of them to the other, as if to ask what was going to happen next. "I'm going to step out on a limb here," Mac announced. "You first." Leaning back against the counter, she looked as if she was bracing for him to punch her. Crossing his arms across his chest, he leaned against the kitchen table. "If the situation was reversed and it was your ex-husband—" "I don't have an ex-husband." "Imagine you did," he said. "If you had an ex and he came here, I wouldn't feel comfortable with him spending the night under the same roof as you, even if nothing happened between the two of you." He plunged on. "The cottage is yours, even if it legally belongs to me. Robin said that you can live there as long as you want. That makes it your home. Since it's your home, you can invite whoever you want to spend the night with you, but—" "But?" He hated that but. "Haven't I said enough? I told you that I don't want you having other men around. What more do I have to say?" "You were upset because you thought Christine had spent the night with me." He came back at her. "Why were you upset about that?" "There. Let's put it back on you." Seeming to have seen the invisible ball tossed into Archie's court, Gnarly turned his gaze from Mac to her. "Because I was jealous." Mac waited for her to go on, but she didn't. "Of what?" Now her hands were on her hips. "Christine kicked you out of your home. She and her lover conspired to wipe you out. They stripped you of everything, and then she had the gall to come here to ask you to take her back. When I came home last night and saw her car here, I thought—" She clenched her jaw shut. "You thought I'd taken her back," he finished for her. "Meanwhile," Seeming to change her mind about what she was about to say, she turned her attention to the coffee. She took the pot from the burner and filled both of the mugs. Mac stepped up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Meanwhile, you've been here for me," he whispered into her ear. Saying nothing, she nodded her head. He kissed her ear. "I'm sorry I'm not good at saying how much people mean to me. But you do mean a lot to me. I missed you last night." Suddenly her arms were around his neck and her mouth on his. He welcomed the return of her scent and her taste as he held her against him. It was as if she didn't want to lose the chance to have him now that he offered the opportunity. With no clear memory of the last time that he'd felt wanted by any woman, Mac had forgotten the joy of the touch of feminine hands on him. He gasped with shock and pleasure when he felt her fingertips and nails on his back when she pulled him to her. The bongs of the grandfather clock in the foyer chiming the 8 o'clock hour brought Mac to his senses with a jolt. "No," he gasped out while pulling away from her. Apologetically, he unwrapped her arms from around his waist. "No?" she whimpered. "I have to go." He kissed her fingertips. "I'm meeting Christine for breakfast at 9 o'clock. "Are you serious?" Not wanting to let her go, he clung to both of her hands in his, while begging for her to understand. "I have to talk to her. I couldn't last night because she was so inebriated. She's been asking the kids for money from their trust funds, which, since I'm the trustee, I won't let them give her, which makes her mad at them. Tristan refuses to talk to her anymore because she's drunk all the time. I'm going to talk to her about going into rehab, and I have to do it at breakfast before she starts drinking again." He pressed her fingers to his lips. He wished that this had been another time, another day, when neither of them had any responsibilities calling them away. He wanted to spend the whole day alone with her and no one else, to get to know her in ways that he had only been imagining for a long time. "Later?" he whispered to her. The sadness in her eyes was replaced with an invitation. "Hurry back." "Oh, I will." He brought his lips to hers. "I'll be back by lunchtime. I'll have Antonio prepare a special lunch for us and bring it home. Cheese and fruit. Strawberries dipped in chocolate." Her eyes lit up. The grin on her face melted his heart. "Strawberries dipped in chocolate it is. And we'll eat them in the jacuzzi together." Like a child excited by the prospect of a dream come true, she clapped her hands. Together, he kissed her one last time before going upstairs to prepare to meet his ex-wife. It took every fiber of Mac's being to force thoughts about his and Archie's plans for later out of his mind and replace them with the matter awaiting him at the top of the mountain. It wasn't as if he hadn't had visions. In reality, they'd been fantasies of this moment. He'd rehearsed them in his mind more than once ever since discovering Christine's affair with Stephen McGuire. Every vision contained a common thread. Christine would realize that while her lover had looks, position, prestige, and wealth, it was her devoted husband who'd always been there for her. Upon making this realization, she would beg for him to take her back, and Mac would take much relish in saying, "No, no, no, and hell no. You made your bed, baby, now lie in it." Then he would leave her on her knees, tearing at her clothes and beating on the ground with her fists in anguish. Now that the opportunity had presented itself for him to live out his fantasy, Mac didn't have the heart to bring it to life. Christine's pitiful condition had sucked the joy out of his vengeance. She'd already made her bed, and not only lain in it, she'd made a full-fledged nest out of it. Mac couldn't leave the mother of his children there. His private table was waiting for him in the corner of the inn's restaurant. As soon as Mac walked through the cut-glass doors, Antonio, the host on duty, whipped a fresh pot of coffee from the burner and took it to the table to fill his cup. "Will Archie be joining you this morning, Mr. Forsyth?" With a snap of his fingers, Antonio signaled for a server to fetch a basket of hot croissants for Mac's table. "It's Faraday," Mac replied. "No, another friend is visiting from out of town. But I do have a special lunch order that I'd like for the kitchen to prepare for her." If it's for Archie, then it won't be anything less than special, Antonio announced, before hurrying to the kitchen to put in Mac's order for their romantic lunch. While Mac watched for Christine, or Stephen McGuire's entrance into the restaurant to flaunt his blue blood among the common folks, the servers continued waiting on other customers. Seeing their nervous glances in his direction, he noted he still hadn't gotten used to being the boss. His employees' anxiousness made him uncomfortable. During his career as a homicide detective, he'd encountered many powerful people who delighted in crushing those who worked for them. Mac wanted so much to not become one of those bosses. When Antonio asked if he wanted to go ahead and order, Mac checked the time on his watch. It was 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. Assuming Christine had overslept, he used his master key card to take the elevator up to the penthouse. "Christine!" Mac called out, while pounding on the door when she didn't answer after his second knock. "Wake up! It's time for breakfast." "What the hell is going on?" The door across the corner, which had a Do Not Disturb sign hanging on it, flew open. Mac's apology for the disturbance was cut short by the shock of seeing the short, squat, bald-headed man standing naked before him. As bald as the top of his head was, his face was covered in a thick gray beard that went down his barrel chest and stomach and the rest of his exposed body. "Don't you know that people are trying to sleep?" the naked man asked, in a European accent so thick that Mac could only decipher his demand by piecing together what words he understood with the context of the situation. Mac found his voice. "I think my—" He stopped when he caught himself starting to call Christine his wife. "My friend was supposed to meet me for breakfast. I guess she slept in." "Why don't you try calling her instead of standing there pounding on the door like some heathen?" the naked man suggested. "All this noise and interruptions. Ugh! If it isn't the maid with towels, it's someone playing horror movies, and now we have—" "Omar!" A woman came into view from the sitting room behind the bald man. "Who are you talking to out there?" Mac saw that the tall, red-headed woman was as naked as her companion, though notably more attractive. "Some heathen trying to wake up the people in the suite across the hall," he called back to her. Based on how he'd left the door wide open, he didn't seem to care if Mac saw her unclothed. "Well, if I were you, I'd hurry up. The clock is ticking, and my 24 hours is up in 2. With the eagerness of a boy being told that this would be his last chance to kiss his date good night, he slammed the door shut. Using his key card, Mac let himself into Christine's room. At first, the silence in the suite made Mac think that Christine had sobered up and, realizing how foolish she'd behaved the day before, left to return home. Then he realized her car was still at Spencer Manor. The suite was too quiet. It was possible for Christine to have left through the lobby and take a cab to the manor to get her car while he was waiting for her in the restaurant. Mac hoped that, if that was the case, she wouldn't run into Archie. If so, he was glad he wouldn't be there to witness the scene. The empty room service tray was a clue that Christine had taken his advice to have dinner sent up. Not seeing any dishes, a quick check told him that she'd had the presence of mind to put her dirty dishes in the kitchenette's dishwasher and run it. During his check inside the dishwasher, Mac noticed 2 plates and 2 wine glasses. It was a dinner for 2. "No, Christine," he murmured. "You didn't." He noticed the first blood splatter on the wall as he rounded the corner into the sitting area. That splatter was followed by another, then a smear and a pool of blood. In the middle of the sitting room, Mac first saw the leather shoes covered in blood. As he stepped into the room, he saw the rest of the body lying behind the coffee table, which had been overturned in the melee. "Christine, what have you done?" The blood that saturated the carpeting soaked into the knees of his pants when he knelt to press his fingertips against the neck that had been sliced open. "Oh, Christine, no." Mac tasted his tears in his mouth. Anger welled up inside him when he looked at the once handsome face of the man who, 12 months before, had been his enemy. "Why did you come up here?" Mac yelled at the dead man. "She said she was going to kill you. You heard her. She swore. Why didn't you stay away, you bastard?" Emotion overrode decades of police training that had become second nature to him. If he had been one of the detectives who had worked under him before he retired, Mac would have raked him over the coals for not leaving the suite immediately and containing the crime scene. With the back of his hand, Mac slapped the dead man's body, getting more blood on his sleeve and hand. The body didn't move in response to his slap. Rigor mortis had already set in. She killed him last night. With the sound of his heartbeat racing in his ears, Mac climbed up to his feet to go in search of clues to his ex-wife's whereabouts. At the door to the master bedroom, his detective training kicked back in. Stephen McGuire had been stabbed several times. Where's the murder weapon? Mac guessed that she put it in the dishwasher when she washed the rest of the dishes to get rid of the evidence. Using a paper towel from the kitchenette in order to not disturb evidence on the door handle, he went into the master bedroom. He was surprised to find her blood-stained clothes scattered on the floor around the bed. Her suitcase rested on the luggage stand. "Christine," he called out, "what happened?" With no other place to search for her in the suite, Mac threw open the bathroom door. The room shone like it had never been touched by human hands, or live ones. He found her naked in the bottom of the shower tub. Her damp blonde hair was plastered to her head and neck. Mac pressed his fingers against her neck to check for a pulse. There was none. Like Stephen McGuire, her body was stiff. Suddenly, all the wounds from the past were gone. Once again, she was his wife, the girl he'd felt honored to have gone out with him, the girl he'd protected and taken care of, the girl he had loved. Holding her cold body, he rocked her in his arms while searching for any sign of life, and finding none. While wiping her hair from her face, his fingers found a deep, bloody gash on the back of her head at the base of her neck. He looked up at the towel rack in the shower above. "So that's what happened," he said to her dead body. He spied chunks of skin under her fingernails and deep red scratches on her arms and neck. Sobbing, he asked her, "Christine, what are we going to tell the children?" Chapter 3. "Mac, are you okay?" Jeff Ingalls asked a third time, while shaking a tumbler filled with bourbon on the rocks in an effort to get his attention. With 2 dead bodies in the owner's private suite at the Spencer Inn, Jeff felt like downing it himself. After receiving Mac's call about the tragedy on the penthouse floor, Jeff directed him to his office on the ground floor to await the police. Sitting motionless on the manager's sofa, Mac replayed the whole scene over and over in his mind. "Mac!" The sharpness of Jeff's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. The call sounded foreign coming from the soft-spoken manager's lips. After following Jeff's eyes to the glass he held out to him, Mac understood the offer. I shouldn't." "If you don't, I will," Jeff said. Mac didn't feel up to a discussion about drinking habits. He took a sip of the bourbon and found that Jeff wasn't steering him wrong. It did help to calm his nerves. "I called Ed," Jeff reported. "He's on his way." "When I was a cop, the suspects who lawyered up the fastest were always moved to the top of my list." Jeff pulled around a chair from the conference table to sit across from him. "Mac, do you know how long the Spencer Inn has had its 5-star rating?" Before Mac could respond that he didn't know, Jeff answered, 75 years. That's longer than either you and I have been alive. Now we have 2 dead bodies, one being a direct descendant." Later, Mac wouldn't recall rising up off the sofa. All he could remember was the roar of his own voice in his head. "I just found my children's mother dead. Do you know who has to call to give them that news? Me, that's who. I have to tell them their mother is dead, and you want to talk to me about how to spin this tragedy to keep from losing some lousy stars to the wisp." The terror in Jeff's face matched the silence in the room. They were both grateful when the office door opened. As they expected, it was Police Chief David O'Callahan and his deputy chief, Arthur Bogart, who carried a canvas bag under his arm. Deputy Chief Art Bogart, called Bogey, was a mountain of a man. His thick mustache and hair were touched with gray. The lines on his strong face told of a man who had lived a life as hard as his body. The late Patrick O'Callahan's closest friend and colleague, Bogey was like a second father to David. "Is everyone okay in here?" David's tone reeked of his authority. It sounded more like an order for any disagreements to be settled now. "No." Mac fell back onto the sofa. Jeff told him, "I'm sorry, Mac. I was out of line." "Yes, you were," Mac said. "But I do know that Robin Spencer hired you to run this place because you're the best at what you do." In spite of his best efforts, he heard his breath shudder. "Do what you have to protect the Spencer Inn's reputation." Jeff reached out to touch Mac's hand. "I won't do anything without clearing it through you first." He grabbed his smartphone and notepad from his desk. Before following David's silent order for him to leave them alone, he stopped to clasp Mac on his shoulder. "In case I haven't already told you, I'm sorry for you and your family's loss." Mac grasped his hand and replied in choked words, "Thank you." The manager hurried from the office. Mac waited for the door to shut before asking if David had been up to the penthouse to survey the scene. "Yes." The police chief turned around the chair that Jeff had vacated and straddled its back. "It's a mess." He gestured at Mac and his clothes. "I see that you've touched the crime scene." "I did more than touch it," Mac muttered. "I jumped in with both feet and contaminated it like some rookie." "It happens," the police chief said. "We'll sort it out." Try as he might, Mac couldn't adjust his thinking from that of the family of a murder victim to that of a cop. "Mac, are you okay?" He was aware of David's touch on his hand. Instead of becoming detached from the scene, he had instead gone back to relive it in his mind. "I was checking to see if either of them was alive, but they weren't. Rigor had already set in." "Oh, look at him." Aware that he'd been avoiding David's eyes, a sign of guilt that he would have quickly spotted when he was a cop, Mac forced himself to look into his eyes. The pity he saw in their blue depths was unbearable. He hated pity. "I didn't do this." Unable to stand the sight of his sympathy, Mac looked over at Bogey, who was at the table in front of the window, unpacking the canvas bag, which contained an evidence kit. Bogey had put on a pair of gloves. David said, "Bogey will have to take your statement." When Mac started to object, he reminded him, "I was at the manor when Christine showed up yesterday. Having seen the two of you together, if I take your statement, someone could later construe it as a conflict of interest that made us eliminate you as a suspect." He took Mac's hand, which was covered in Stephen McGuire's blood. "About your clothes, Archie is bringing a change of clothes for me." David asked in a gentle tone, "Did you call your kids yet?" "No." "I suggest you do that as soon as Bogey is through. The media's already gotten wind of this, and they're coming out here in swarms." "I'm ready, Chief." Bogey stepped over to them with an open evidence bag in his hand. "Let's start with the shirt." Mac stood up and unbuttoned his shirt. Glancing down at it, he realized it was a new shirt that his daughter Jessica had sent him from a shopping trip to New York. A third-year student at William & Mary, she enjoyed shopping trips with her friends and sending stylish fashion to her father, who despised shopping as much as she loved it. His distaste for shopping showed in his casual blue jeans, faded T-shirts, and worn Dockers. As he unbuttoned it, Mac realized that he'd put it on that morning because Archie had commented about how it brought out the blue in his eyes the first time he wore it. He had put it on for her. While watching David fold his shirt, Mac recalled the touch of Archie's hands on his bare back less than 2 hours earlier, and his anticipation of being with her, all while the woman who'd borne his children was lying dead. Mac's stomach churned. His ears filled with a roaring sound. "Mac, are you okay?" Jerked from his thoughts, Mac was aware of David's hand on his shoulder, while Bogey had his other shoulder in a firm grasp. "You're going to be sick," David yelled through the roar that filled his head. Through a hazy fog, he saw David pointing to Jeff's private bathroom. Mac sprinted to the small room where he fell to his knees and emptied his coffee, toast, and bourbon into the toilet. A cold sweat bathed his shoulders and back. He could feel it dripping down his bare chest while he knelt in front of the toilet. By the time his stomach stopped churning, he became aware of David stepping around behind him to take his hand towel off the rack and run it under the faucet in the sink. "I feel like such a rookie," Mac spoke into the toilet bowl. 20 years in homicide, hundreds of cases. Never once did I ever contaminate a crime scene or toss my cookies." He flinched when he felt the cold towel on his bare shoulders. David pressed it against the back of his neck. "Were any of those murder victims your wife?" "Ex-wife." Mac glanced up at him. "She was murdered, Dave. Someone killed her. She has skin under her fingernails." David ran his fingers from Mac's shoulder and down his side. "And I see you have scratches on your back." David wanted to get upstairs to talk to the M.E. before she left with the bodies. He needed a preliminary report to know where to start in his investigation. With the murders happening at the Spencer Inn and Mac Faraday's penthouse suite, everyone was going to be demanding answers. He was coming out of Jeff Ingles' office after Bogey had started interviewing Mac when he practically collided with Archie, who was trying to go inside with his change of clothes. "Is he okay?" She wanted to know when David took the clothes and sent them inside without letting her see Mac. "As well as you would expect him to be," was all David said, while ushering her down the corridor and away from the office. "What did he tell you?" "Nothing," she said. "Only that Christine and Stephen McGuire, the guy she divorced him for, were dead and that he'd been in the crime scene and needed fresh clothes." "How did it happen?" "You know, I can't talk about it, Archie." As they neared the lobby, he was aware of more people, many resembling the media, milling around. "Where were you last night?" "Do I need an alibi?" she asked him. "You and Mac have become pretty tight in the last few months." He was pleased when he saw her cheeks turn pink. "We both saw Christine yesterday asking Mac to take her back. If he had—" "He didn't." "Now that she's gone—" "I have an alibi," Archie said. "Mac?" "What's the time of death?" "I'm going upstairs to find that out." David glanced at his watch. Archie said, "I went to visit a friend of Robin's. She's a literature professor at Frostburg. She has issues, and last night she called upset. I went to cheer her up. We had a couple of drinks in a lounge near the university campus. I'm sure people saw me there. I got home around midnight. I can give you her phone number." "What about Mac? Did you see him when you got in around midnight?" He held his breath while waiting for her response. "No, I went straight to my place. I didn't see him until this morning around 7:30, she added. "But he was with Gnarly last night." "I wonder if he'll give me a statement." Frustrated by her failure to volunteer for being the source of the scratches on Mac's back, he asked, "Did Gnarly put scratches on his back?" When her face turned a deeper shade of pink, he sighed with relief. "It was you." "I did that this morning, before he came to see Christine. I was excited." His chuckle only added to her embarrassment. "Don't tell me you've never had a woman scratch your back." "Not an hour before I became a murder suspect." "Mac didn't do this," she insisted. "I know." The corner of David's lips curled. "While your scratches were impressive, they weren't anywhere nearly deep enough. Whoever Christine scratched before she died, she drew blood." The police presence on the top floor had caused the guests in the other suites to clear out. Any ruffled feathers were soothed with Jeff offering guests a free day of pampering at the Spencer Inn Resort's award-winning spa. Each guest's displeasure dissipated. Some were so anxious to take advantage of the offer that they rushed off to the spa in bathrobes and towels as soon as the police released them after giving their statements. 2 police officers stood guard at the suite's door to keep unwanted visitors out. They parted to allow their chief to cross the threshold. When David first arrived at the hotel, the horror of what had happened hit him like a slap in the face upon entering the sitting area. Furniture was overturned. The victim that Mac had identified as Stephen McGuire rested on his side in the middle of a blood-stained carpet. Blood splatters and drops covered the walls, furniture, and floor like brown polka dots. The bathroom was another story. The counters and surfaces shone like they'd never been used. Mac had left Christine's body in the tub where he'd found it. Her blood-stained clothes were scattered around the bedroom where she appeared to have discarded them after killing her lover. When David returned, he found the lead crime scene investigator packing up her equipment in the dining area. Cindy's tiny build made her look too young to drive, let alone lead a forensics investigation. "Is it too early for you to have anything for me?" the police chief asked. "That's the cleanest bathroom I've seen in my life," Cindy reported. "It was scrubbed down with bleach. No fingerprints, except for those that we're assuming right now belong to Mr. Faraday. Don't count on getting any other prints or DNA. Everything was soaked and washed down with bleach. Then the shower was left on to wash everything else down the drain." David scratched the side of his head. He didn't say anything about the shower being on when it had been shut off, she interrupted to explain. Each of these suites is outfitted with timers on the showers, sinks, and appliances that automatically shut off the water for the whole unit if it runs too long. It's a safeguard device to prevent water damage from overflow, or leaks if the plumbing breaks, or a guest passes out drunk after turning on the shower. When I got here, the shower handle was turned in the on position, but the water control valve for the unit was still off. "I should have noticed that," David admitted. Pleased with herself, she shot him a grin. "That's why I'm forensics and you're the chief." "How about Mrs. Faraday? Did she slip and hit her head on the shower after killing Mr. McGuire?" Cindy shook her head. "We need to open her up first. She has a serious bruise and laceration on the back of her head and neck. I hear she was intoxicated. You may not be far off." "Her husband, or ex-husband, says she was an alcoholic," David said. "The manager stated she was seriously intoxicated when Mr. Faraday checked her in. Plus, she'd gotten into an altercation with the victim around 5:30 yesterday afternoon. Based on what you collected, what do you think happened here?" "Time of death on him is approximately 10:30 last night." Cindy pointed at the dishwasher with her hand encased in an evidence glove. "We have dinner plates and glasses for dinner for two." She gestured at the table under her evidence kit. "They have dinner. She's drunk and volatile. They get into a fight." She led David into the sitting room. "This is where things go really bad. She attacks him with the knife, probably from their dinner. I found steak knives in the dishwasher, and kills him. She needs to get rid of the evidence. She returns to the kitchen." Cindy pointed to the drops of blood leading into the kitchenette. "She puts the murder weapon in the dishwasher along with the dinner dishes. I guess she thought that as long as she was cleaning the murder weapon, she might as well." Leading the way into the bedroom, she continued her breakdown of the murder. Now she comes to the bedroom and realizes that she has Stephen McGuire's blood and tissue all over her and her clothes. She strips off her clothes, goes into the bathroom to wash away the evidence. After cleaning the bathroom, she climbs into the bathtub to take a shower, slips, hits her head, and dies. David glanced around the bathroom. "There's a problem with your theory." "The skin under her fingernails," Cindy said. "The stabbing victim has no scratches. She could have had another altercation with someone else. Maybe the ex?" "Not him." David picked up the trash can and peered inside. Not only was it empty, but it was clean. "Have you checked the trash can in the kitchen?" He checked the cabinet under the sink. That, too, was bare. "Yes," Cindy answered. "It was empty. All of the trash was taken out." "By whom? You said this room was scrubbed down with bleach. Who did that?" "Christine Faraday. If she had left to take out the trash, she would have needed her key card to get back into the room, in which case security would have a record of it," David explained. "According to them, Christine Faraday never left the suite." Perplexed, the investigator shrugged her shoulders while shaking her head. "According to you, Christine Faraday died while cleaning the bathroom with bleach immediately after the murder." He held out the empty trash can to her. How did she get rid of the bottle of bleach she'd used to scrub down the bathroom without leaving the room? That's for you to figure out, Cindy replied. That's why they made you police chief. Chapter 4. Isn't it ironic? Mac and Christine had always expected that he would die first. After all, he was the one out there dodging bullets while tracking down killers. She was home with the kids or working in a law office as a paralegal. Now he was trying to put her affairs in order. While Mac remained in Spencer to keep tabs on the murder investigation as best he could, his daughter Jessica drove up from Williamsburg to stay at her mother's home to make the funeral arrangements. Immediately came the calls from Jessica about Mac's former in-laws' strong-arm attempts to take over the funeral. Christine's older sibling, Sabrina, enjoyed the role of family matriarch. Since her marriage to the president of an accounting firm, who had provided well for her expensive tastes, Sabrina, with her orange hair and jewels dripping from her queenly figure, viewed the role of dictating what was best for her family very seriously. Claiming to know exactly how Christine would want her funeral to be handled, Sabrina had swept in and ordered Jessica to sit back and deal with the grief of losing her mother, while letting her handle all the details. When I told her no thank you, Jessica reported in her latest call to her father, she got all huffy and stormed out of the house. When I went outside a little bit ago, our garbage cans had been run over. I don't want to be pointing fingers, but I think she did it. In the background, through the phone, Mac could hear Jessica going through the kitchen cabinets while preparing breakfast after her daily 5-mile run, something she did like clockwork. Mac's daughter was a creature of habit and discipline. Before discovering his birthright, Mac had sometimes wondered if she'd inherited her strong sense of discipline from someone on his side of the family. A life-size portrait of Robin Spencer hung in Mac's study. It had been painted over 40 years earlier. Dressed in the strapless gown her wealthy parents had designed for her coming-out party, Robin was ravishing with her long dark hair swept up. Her skin was like porcelain against her dark features and sapphire eyes. She looked like Elizabeth Taylor in her early movies. When he had first laid eyes on the portrait, Mac had been struck by the resemblance between his birth mother and his daughter, Jessica. Robin's portrait had answered his question about who his beautiful daughter took after. You knew this was coming, Mac told her. This happens every time anyone plans anything in that family. Sabrina has to be in charge, and it has to be the social event of the season or nothing else. When it doesn't go exactly the way she wants it, she throws a tantrum. I don't remember one event that involved your aunts that didn't end in a family feud with someone getting slapped and vases getting broken. That's why I always volunteered to work those nights. With the meeting scheduled at the Spencer Inn later, Mac mentally prepared for the day with more coffee. At his feet he could hear Gnarly chomping away at his breakfast. He wondered if it was possible to teach a dog to chew with his lips shut. Do dogs even have lips? If not, why does he flap so loudly when he eats? I want this to be over, Jessica sighed with a sob. Hearing the pain in her voice, Mac's heart ached. Unknowingly, she added to his pain with, I wish you were here. David said that he expects the medical examiner to release your mother's body today. I'll arrange to have it sent to the funeral home in Georgetown as soon as possible. He asked, How's Tristan holding up? I called last night and he was working at the museum. I think he's in denial. A forensic psychology major, Jessica had diagnosed Tristan as being in denial about everything ever since she first heard the word used by a psychologist on television. Tristan took after his father with his auburn hair, high cheekbones, and slim, muscular build. He also had inherited his father's blue eyes. What he didn't inherit was Mac's love for murder mysteries. Tristan loved animals and nature, in particular dinosaurs. A sophomore at George Washington University, he was a devoted college student and practically lived at the Natural History Museum. Mac was grateful that neither of his children had made great changes in their lifestyles since inheriting $10 million each in trusts from their grandmother they'd never met. Neither of them took to wild parties and extravagant shopping sprees. Jessica did upgrade her wardrobe and bought a Corvette. He also suspected that she'd traded up her hairstylist. Unlike any other teenager who inherited millions of dollars, Tristan resisted the urge to buy a hot car. Like his father, who had purchased a Dodge Viper sports car within days of receiving his inheritance. Practical to a fault, Tristan pointed out that since he lived in the city, it took longer to drive to campus and find a place to park and walk to his class than it did to take public transportation. Instead, he splurged on the latest and greatest computer equipment with state-of-the-art scientific research capabilities that only Archie could understand and appreciate. According to Jessica, Tristan barely missed a beat between his classes and jobs since his mother's murder. She talked to him. He'd also received a lecture from his Aunt Sabrina about respecting his mother by emoting his grief in a more public manner. Mac could imagine the motive behind his son's withdrawal into his schoolwork. He recalled receiving the same lecture when his adopted father passed away after a long illness. While Mac grieved the loss, he had also felt relief that his father's suffering was over. Even though Tristan's circumstances were different, Mac suspected that he wasn't in denial as much as he may have been in hiding. It's bad enough losing a loved one without getting flack for handling it wrong. Tristan wasn't the only one in the family receiving grief from Mac's ex-in-laws. After discovering the crushed garbage cans, Jessica had called Mac to announce that she was ready to give in to her aunt's demands. "I guess we can let Aunt Sabrina have the reception at her house afterward. That might placate her." This isn't about Aunt Sabrina. Don't let her bully you into doing anything you think is wrong or that you don't think your mother would have wanted." Mac felt a grin come to his lips when Archie, carrying a basket filled with croissants, came in from the deck. He could smell the freshly baked goods as soon as she stepped through the door. "By the way," Jessica added as he was about to hang up, "I think someone broke into Mom's house." "Was anything taken?" Mac wasn't surprised. It wasn't uncommon for homes to be broken into after news of the occupants' deaths. Knowing no one was home, the houses were considered easy pickings for thieves. "Nothing of value," she reported. "I can just tell that your Stephen's, had been gone through. The safe was open, but all of Mom's papers were there. I don't know about Stephen's. I assumed he took what was his when he moved out. I didn't even bother calling the police. You think I should?" Mac told her to report the break-in to the police, in case it might be connected in some way with the Stephen McGuire's murder. He was about to hang up and dive into the croissant that Archie had placed in front of him with a helping of strawberry jam when his daughter went on to her next subject. "Roxanne wants to know what you want to do about the lake house," Jessica announced. Mac moaned. "I told her to talk to you. Did you know that Mom never changed her will?" Mac told her that his lawyer, Ed Willingham, had already given him that news the day before. "Aunt Roxanne is having a cow. Something about Mom never signing over the lake house to her. Thought I'd let you know." She finished the phone call with a, "Have a nice day." Hanging up the phone, Mac buried his face in his hands and groaned. "I finished editing the book. Sent it in at 3:30 this morning and made lots and lots of money." Archie rubbed both of his shoulders. "How's your day shaping up?" "Tell me you don't have any sisters." He realized as he said it that she never talked about her family or childhood. It was always his family that they discussed. "Only child." She held up her hand in a Scout's honor salute. Then I'll marry you." He wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her to him. From where he was sitting at the breakfast counter and she stood, it brought his head to rest on her shoulder. She returned the hug. Funerals are always stressful. Death is stressful, especially when it's someone you love. Yeah, but the dead person doesn't have to deal with anything. They just sit back and enjoy it. She said, "Your mother once said to me, 'Have you ever noticed that it's after you're dead that suddenly everyone is concerned about what you want?' Believe me, these chicks aren't concerned about what Christine wants." When his cell phone rang, he checked the caller ID. It read Roxanne Burton. He decided not to answer it. Why didn't you answer that? It was Christine's sister, one of Stephen McGuire's colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office. He was the head of the criminal division. She's his counterpart in the family court division. She introduced Christine to McGuire. He shot Archie a sarcastic grin. I never thanked her for that. He dabbed the butter and jam onto one of the croissants. Christine was the baby of 3 girls. Their daddy did a stint like 8 years as ambassador to Brazil. They lived in a big house with servants and bodyguards and went to swanky parties and dated men in uniforms. They became spoiled, she said. They were actually called Daddy's little princesses, he told her. It was pointed out to Christine, and me, that she married beneath her station in life. Sabrina, the oldest, married the president of a big accounting firm. Roxanne modeled her way through school and has the ear of every influential legal eagle in D.C. Now she's standing in line to beat my chops about Christine's will. You told me yesterday that they found out that she'd never changed it after the divorce. Or the beneficiary on her life insurance, he said. Jessica remembers her mother saying at one point that she was going to make Roxanne the executor and leave everything to the kids, but she never did it. Teaches you to never put things off. It should be a no-brainer, Max said. I've already talked to Ed. Okay, I'm the executor. I'll do what she wanted. Split everything between the 2 kids, 50-50. The house is going to be sold because neither of them wants it. They decide between themselves who wants what. He sighed. Then Ed took a look at her accounts. Archie asked, what's the problem? Christine was head over heels in debt. When Archie cocked an eyebrow at him, he explained, when I left Christine, she was more than fixed. Her father had died the year before she kicked me out. Each of the sisters had received over $100,000. You might say that inheritance was the beginning of the end for us. Money was always an issue. I never made enough for her. Her father spoiled her rotten. Then, when Big Daddy died, she screwed up her face. Did they really call him Big Daddy? And he was only 5'8" tall. Unbelievable, Mac continued. I wanted to put the money into a trust fund for our retirement and the kids' college. She wanted to spend it on stuff in order to bring us up to par with her sisters. According to Ed's findings, that's exactly what she did after getting rid of me. It's all gone, and the bank is about to foreclose on her house. The only thing she had left was her share of the lake house. If Roxanne wants to buy out her share, which when we were married she made no secret about wanting to do, then that might pay off some of her debts. Mac tapped his finger on the breakfast bar. This is her sister's fault. It wasn't keep up with the Joneses in our house. It was keep up with the sisters. Designer clothes, spas, parties all the time. I was a drag because I wanted to live within our means. McGuire seduced her into running around with the sisters. She threw me out so she could do what she wanted to with her money, and it looked like she died with nothing but bills to her name. You mentioned a lake house? Archie asked. Right here in Spencer, Max said. It's on the mountain, has a lake view. I'd only been there a couple of times. Right about the time she kicked me out, it was appraised at $500,000. I'm surprised Christine's name is still on the deed. I know she intended to sell her third to Roxanne. He glanced at his watch. I need to go. I'm meeting the chief of security at the inn for breakfast to see if he can give me any details about where David is in his investigation. He frowned. David won't tell me anything. That's because you haven't been cleared as a suspect, Archie said. I only just got cleared since Bogey was able to reach my alibi at Frostburg. A naughty grin crept to her lips. If you and I had been sleeping together, then we could have alibied each other and had a good time doing it. I'll remember that the next time I plan a murder. Standing up, he kissed her quickly on the lips. When they parted, he held her close, not wanting to let her go. I promise that when this is over, we're moving forward in what we talked about before all this happened, unless all this made you change your mind about me. She whispered to him, I'm not going anywhere. The dongs of the doorbell made them jump back from their embrace as if they'd been caught with their hands in the sexual cookie jar. More flowers? Since Christine's death, he'd been receiving tons of flowers and sympathy gifts from many people he didn't know who'd been friends of his late mother. As if he were voicing their displeasure, Gnarly charged for the door. The two people waiting on his doorstep were yet another piece of Mac's Georgetown past. As he often thought when he saw the two of them together, Natasha Homestead and Judge Garrison Sutherland made an odd couple. After years of seeing the two of them out about town together, Mac was still unsure if they were indeed a couple in the romantic sense of the word. He never saw them kissing, holding hands, or other body language that betrayed two people being romantically linked. They never appeared to be guilty about being seen together, which led Mac to suspect that they were simply very good friends. Considering that she was married to Stephen McGuire and, to Mac's knowledge, had never divorced him, to be romantically linked with Judge Sutherland gave them much reason to be apprehensive, if they were indeed a couple. Mac was never sure, which bothered him. He hated not being able to pin someone down. Natasha Homestead was the personification of brains over beauty. Not that she was ugly. She was as skinny as a stick. Bee stings were bigger than her breasts, and she'd no butt to speak of. If she could ever do something with her cinnamon-colored hair, which she wore in a chin-length bob style with the part in the middle and combed straight down the sides, she would be considered attractive. From all the beauties that Mac knew Stephen McGuire had bedded throughout the years, the only reason that he could conclude for him marrying Natasha was the millions of dollars a year she made defending the richest criminals in the world. He certainly didn't marry her for her winning personality. Mac knew Garrison Sutherland from back when he had held Stephen McGuire's position in the U.S. Attorney's Office. As mediocre a prosecutor as McGuire had been, Sutherland was sharp and fair. He carried his passion to the bench. While Natasha stood tall and thin, Judge Sutherland was short and stocky, with black hair and wire-rimmed glasses. She was aggressive. He was soft-spoken. As abrasive as she was, he was compromising. "Hello, Mac," the judge greeted him with a somber voice, while holding out his hand to him. "Natasha and I came to personally offer our condolences on your loss." Stunned by the visit from the couple who had lived over 3 hours away, Mac accepted their condolence, while holding Gnarly back by his collar. Gnarly liked to check out every visitor by giving them a nasal pat-down. Mac invited them into the living room. Natasha and Garrison reacted with surprise at seeing that their host had company. "I hope we're not interrupting anything," the judge said, while easing Gnarly's snout away from its pants pockets. After assuring them that they weren't, Mac introduced them. "This is Archie Monday." Not sure what to call her, he stumbled over the words. "She's my friend." He realized, even as he said it, that his tone sounded guilty. He didn't like the knowing glances that Garrison and Natasha exchanged upon hearing the introduction. After he'd finished checking out the judge, Gnarly moved on to examine Natasha, who gave his snout a quick swat. She might as well have called him out for a duel. The German shepherd backed up and sat with his eyes on her. He dared her to make her next shot. Judge Sutherland waited until after they'd taken seats on the sofa across from Mac and Archie to explain the reason for their visit. "I don't know if you're aware, but Natasha has suffered a loss as well. You see, she and Stephen McGuire were still married." Archie said, "I'm sorry to hear that." "Thank you for your kindness." Natasha blinked away non-existent tears while wiping one away from her cheek. Having seen the defense attorney in action in the courtroom, Mac was very familiar with her techniques. She was like any predator. She laid low and observed her prey before devouring it, with no regrets for doing so. Garrison went on in his methodical tone, as if he were explaining the intricate steps of a murder plan to a jury. "For a variety of reasons which we won't bore you with, Mac, Natasha and Stephen had made a decision to remain married while living separate lives. They were still each other's beneficiaries. As a matter of fact, Stephen had left Natasha sole heir to his estate, which leads to the reason for our visit. Natasha jumped in. I'd like to know when I can pick up Stephen's stuff. Mac asked, What stuff? The stuff he left at Christine's house, Natasha said. He left it all there while he was looking for another place to live. Since he left everything to me, then it's mine, and I want to make arrangements to pick it up. Also, I want any personal effects that he had left in his room at your hotel. The police have taken it into evidence, but surely they don't need it. Everyone knows what happened. Christine flipped out and gave Stephen what he had coming for a long time. The police don't need to keep his personal effects to prove that. Garrison said, We tried to talk to the police chief about it, but he's been stonewalling us. We were told that you two are pretty good buddies. Maybe you can use your influence. You and McGuire haven't been living together for years, Mac replied. According to my information, he's lived with at least 3 other women since leaving you. But we did remain friends, she said. Friendly enough for him to leave you everything, Mac said. Sounds to me like a motive for wanting him dead. When Natasha made a move, threatening to jump across the room to physically force Mac to give her what she wanted, she became aware of Gnarly between them. The dog's unblinking eyes were on her. Easing back into her seat, Natasha said, Since there's no shortage of rich criminals looking to get away with murder, I'm very wealthy in my own right. Compared to my own financial portfolio, his estate isn't worth the energy it would have taken to kill him. Money isn't the only reason to kill someone, Mac said. Why are you so anxious to get your hands on his stuff now? What did McGuire have that you wanted badly enough to exert your energy killing him? I resent that. She shot a glare at Mac and another one at the dog that refused to stop staring at her. Natasha, please, came the plea from her companion, who patted her hand. It's not like you don't know how this works. Ask Mac to tell you what Stephen had with him, and then, if it's there, ask him nicely if he can help you get it back. If it isn't pertinent to the case, then maybe the police chief will let you take it without the pissing contest. For her own curiosity, Archie asked, What is it? Natasha gritted her teeth and looked over to Garrison, who waved his hand in a gesture for her to go on. Finally, she told them, A watch, a gold pocket watch. It had belonged to my father. When I married Stephen, Dad gave it to him. Why didn't you take it when you separated? Mac wanted to know. The attorney's face flushed. I didn't know he took it with him until after he'd moved out. I asked him to give it back, but Stephen argued it was a gift, which, yes, it was, but my father never would have given it to him if he'd known what a prick he was. Since we never officially got divorced. Why didn't you divorce him? Archie asked. It's complicated. Natasha rolled her eyes in a way that reminded Mac of when his daughter had been an adolescent in middle school. After years of being on the receiving end of the teenage eye roll, such gestures now instantly got under his skin. The defense attorney said, It's a purely sentimental value to me. Since Stephen's dead now, Christine probably didn't even know he ever had it. A watch? A pocket watch? Mac scoffed. You're here making all this stink over a watch, which since you're his heir, you're going to get eventually anyway. It belonged to my father. Natasha moved to the edge of her seat. Like an army general seeing the enemy make an advance move, Gnarly inched forward. All he needed was the word. I don't believe you, Mac said. Someone broke into Christine's home and went through her stuff. Why shouldn't I think it was you? Garrison grasped her arm as if to hold her back. Offer him something to work with, Natasha. She asked Mac, If I tell you what I know about who else would have wanted Stephen dead, will you help me get what is rightfully mine? Tell me what you know, then I might be persuaded to help you. When Mac turned to follow her eyes to that of her companion, in search of his opinion, he noticed the judge staring at him. After years of knowing and working with Judge Garrison Sutherland, he recognized the expression on his face. It was one of study. The man had seen something that captured his interest. Seeing the judge's thoughts were elsewhere, Natasha said, "I really shouldn't do anything to help catch whoever did society a public service by killing that slime bucket." "Think of it this way," Mac said. "For once you'll be helping to catch a murderer instead of getting him off." Somehow that persuaded her. Stephen was extremely ambitious. "Now tell me something I don't know." "Boris Hunter, the U.S. Attorney, has been burning up the phone lines to get on the short list to be appointed U.S. Attorney General, to replace Reed ever since the grapevine started murmurings about him announcing his retirement before the holidays. I suppose you didn't hear that his cancer resurfaced?" "No, I didn't." "Meanwhile, this whole summer, Stephen and Roxanne Burton have been neck and neck to replace George Vance." Natasha shot Mac in the side. "Did you know Hunter's deputy, George Vance, got appointed judge?" "Vance deserves it," Mac said. "He's a good guy." "Well, according to my sources," Natasha said, "Hunter decided on Stephen McGuire. It wasn't official, but he hadn't announced it yet. I guess now that Stephen is dead, he'll be falling back to number 2. "Christine's sister Roxanne," Mac noted. The judge jumped back into the conversation with the question, "If Boris Hunter gets appointed Attorney General and Vance is judge of the criminal court, then who'll take Hunter's place?" Mac's and Archie's faces were blank. Even Gnarly's expression was questioning. Natasha said, "Not Vance. He's got what he's always wanted. He's not going to step down from judgeship to take Hunter's old job." Archie looked over at Mac. "Stephen McGuire." Tapping his hand on imaginary steps on the coffee table, Garrison told them, "Stephen McGuire was hoping to go from criminal prosecutor straight into the seat of U.S. Attorney." Mac pointed out, "It's a really big jump for a prosecutor who didn't have a very good conviction record." "But Stephen figured out a way to do it," Natasha said. "He was investigating wrongdoing in the U.S. Attorney's office. Once he got his evidence, he was going to go public with it. He'd smuggled out some case files. Hunter sent Hamilton Sanders, McGuire's assistant, here to get them back. He's probably at the police station right now." "Evidence of what wrongdoing?" Mac wanted to know. "That I don't know," she said. "I only know that he was planning to make a big media splash by exposing or insinuating unethical, or maybe downright illegal, dealings in the prosecutor's office to get his name and face out there. Then he planned to ride that media wave to get appointed U.S. Attorney for D.C. "But if he found something dirty and went public with it, wouldn't that ruin Hunter's chances for getting appointed Attorney General?" Archie asked. "Yeah," Natasha said. "But Stephen didn't care about that. The way McGuire saw it, he could win either way, whether Hunter got the appointment or not," explained Garrison. Mac said, "If McGuire was onto something and the man who'd put him on the fast track got wind of it—" "Which he did," Natasha smirked. "You sold him out and warned Hunter," Mac said. "Stephen did nothing to earn my loyalty," she pointed out. "It wasn't a week later that someone slipped arsenic into his champagne at a retirement party for Judge Anderson at the Chase Club." Archie wanted to know, "How do we know you weren't the one who slipped it to him? Were you at the party?" "Yes, I was there, but I had no reason to want him dead." She glanced at Gnarly as if to tell him that she wanted him dead. "What were you doing Saturday night?" Mac asked her. "Were you here at Deep Creek Lake?" "I won't dignify that question with an answer," she replied, forcefully. "For one thing, you're not even a cop anymore. You have no right to treat me like a murder suspect." "You came to me," Mac reminded her. "I doubt if you drove all the way out here from Washington only to give me your condolences." "Half of the attorney's office was at that party," she scoffed. "People who I just told you McGuire had been investigating." "Where were you while your husband was being killed?" Archie demanded to know. "She was with me," Garrison answered in a bored tone. He asked Natasha, "Why do you have to make everything so hard?" He went on to tell them, "Yes, we've been in the area since the Thursday before the murder. Purely coincidence. Natasha and I are staying at the Carmel Cove Inn, a favorite little bed and breakfast we like to visit in the autumn. We checked in Thursday afternoon. We were already here in Deep Creek Lake when we got the call from the police. It responded to Natasha's glare by telling her, a simple check of your cell record would have told the police that we were already here. Can you give us names of witnesses to confirm you were at the Carmel Cove Inn? Mac asked. Garrison said, the owner saw us when we came back from dinner and went up to our room at around 10 o'clock Saturday night. Okay, we answered your stupid and insulting questions, and it's apparent that you don't intend to willingly turn over my husband's things, so I guess we'll be going on our way. Natasha stood up. When Gnarly mirrored her moves, she uttered a growl deep in her throat. Just one more thing, Mac asked, before she had time to follow Judge Sutherland into the foyer. Do you have any idea what business Stephen may have had here in Spencer? Tearing her attention from the dogs escorting her out, she turned back to him. Business? He paid for his suite with a federal government credit card, Mac explained. That tells me it was a business trip. That doesn't mean that he was here on business, Natasha laughed. Stephen never paid for anything with his own money unless he had to. That's one of the reasons I kicked him out. Most likely his visit was enjoyment. He was seen out here with a woman, Garrison said. And Christine tried to punch her lights out. She also announced to everyone within hearing distance that she was going to kill him dead hours before he got his, Natasha reminded them. I did hear about Stephen having a new woman. I never saw her. Personally, I didn't care to see her. I couldn't care less about what he was up to. Unless he pawned your father's watch, Mac said. Until Mac was officially cleared of suspicion, David wouldn't let him in on any details in his murder investigation. Unable to stand not knowing what the police had uncovered, Mac met his only source into the goings-on, Hector Langford, the Spencer Inn's chief of security. A lean, gray-haired Australian, Hector had been with the inn for over 25 years, which was longer than Jeff Ingle had worked there. Hector knew the resort inside and out. When they'd first met, he took great delight in informing Mac that Robin Spencer had often asked for his help in planning her murders for her books. With it being midweek, the inn's restaurant was quiet for their 9 o'clock meeting. Mac wondered if the murders could be the reason for the solitude. Jeff had been predicting guest registrations would plummet as a result of the press about the owner's ex-wife and her lover getting slaughtered in his private suite. So far, though, there'd been no cancellations. After placing their breakfast order, Mac asked Hector, "What can you tell me?" "The maid did it." "Which maid?" Mac turned to scrutinize a woman in the cleaning staff uniform washing the windows. Every Spencer Inn employee wore a uniform. Office and desk clerks were distinguished by their black suits with white shirts. The restaurant staff wore white, long-sleeved shirts over black slacks with a black apron that hung down to their knees. A similar uniform with black smock or apron was reserved for the cleaning staff. No matter what type of uniform the employees wore, it displayed the resort's insignia, which consisted of the Spencer family crest, stenciled on the blazer's breast pocket or on the top portion of the apron. "The maid did it?" Mac asked Hector, to elaborate on what sounded like something out of a B movie. It sounded as bad as saying that the butler did it. Both men sat back and fell silent while the server returned to the table with the bread basket and fresh coffee. "The name she gave was Nita," Hector told him in a low voice. "The name she gave?" Mac repeated. "Don't you know? If she was an employee—" "That's the problem," the security chief said. "No one knows her except for a few service people who never saw her until a few days before the murders, and never since. The chief of housekeeping has no idea who this Nita is. It's very embarrassing. I'm surprised Jeff said nothing to you." When their food arrived, they fell silent while the server placed their plates in front of them. Mac had ordered French toast and sausage, while Hector had ordered a fruit and yogurt plate. "Tell me about this Nita." Mac poured the syrup over his French toast. According to everyone who spoke to us, she barely knew English, if any, Hector reported. We got her on the security video. Unfortunately, we don't have a good enough picture to show anyone. The service staff gave us a description, though. Why would she kill them? Mac took a bite from his French toast. He chewed while waiting for the security chief to answer his question. Hector stared at his plate. Mac asked, "Does anyone have any idea who she is?" "All we know is that she had long, thick black hair and wore black glasses. She was seen wearing a cleaning uniform, mixing in with the help." "What about the key card that all the employees get?" Mac pointed at the identification card that Hector kept in his breast pocket. For security, all employees had identification cards that contained encrypted codes, which allowed them access into areas where they needed to work. Key cards wouldn't grant access for areas where the employees had no reason to enter. For example, a bartender's key card wouldn't allow him into the accounting office. Since access cards were needed to get into several areas of the resort, most employees wore them attached to lanyard cords around their necks. Other employees would clip them to their belts. There were very few security key cards that granted access to all areas of the Spencer Inn resort. Mac possessed one. As the inn's manager, Jeff Engel also had one, as did Hector Langford and his deputy chief. The security chief told Mac, "The employees I interviewed said she wore a lanyard around her neck, and they saw what looked like a security pass on her breast pocket. But when I pressed them, they realized they never saw her use it. It was for show. She could have used any card or had a picture taped to a white blank one," Hector laughed. "It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. A guy hangs out in front of an apartment building that has a security lock. When someone else goes in, the guy follows him inside. Happens all the time." "But who—" Hector took a sip of his coffee before saying, "The police found a black wig and black glasses and the smock from the Spencer Inn cleaning uniform in Christine's suitcase. Nita was first seen here in the inn on Thursday. That's the same day Stephen McGuire checked in. No one has seen her since the murders." His tone softened. "I'm sorry to say this, Mac, but I think she was stalking McGuire. I'm pretty certain the police agree." "What does David O'Callahan say?" "He's not talking to anyone." His displeasure about not being on the inside of David O'Callahan's investigation was evident. Jeff Engel appeared at Mac's elbow. "How are you and your family holding up?" We'll be okay." Mac thought, what's the alternative? Jeff slid into the seat next to him. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm worried about something." "You're always worried about something," Mac finished off the last of his French toast. "That's what I pay you for." Seeming to miss the humor behind Mac's comment, the manager plunged on. "Stephen McGuire was killed 3 days ago. The media has covered it. I've seen it on the news. They say the McGuire family has refused comment, and to date no one from the McGuire family has contacted me. You'd think Ed would have at least gotten a call from their lawyer." "Isn't no call from them a good thing?" Mac asked. "Do you want them to call just to accuse us of wrongdoing?" Jeff mopped his brow with a napkin from the place setting he was sitting at. "No, I don't want the McGuire family demanding to know what we did wrong. But no call at all from them? No family representative telling the media that they intend to get to the bottom of this? That doesn't happen." "I haven't released any statements about Christine's death," Mac pointed out. "You aren't Broderick McGuire," Jeff leaned in to whisper. "It makes me wonder if they aren't saying anything because they're preparing to slap us with a humongous multi-million-dollar wrongful death lawsuit." "We didn't do anything wrong." Hector pounded the tabletop with his fist. "Whoever killed those people are the ones who did something wrong." "But the hole in our security is what allowed it to happen," Jeff said. "Now you sound like you're talking for their side," the security chief objected. Mac was grateful for the vibration on his hip signaling the call on his phone. It gave him an excuse to end the conversation. "Quiet, man." He checked the text on his phone. Jeff looked as if he feared that his wish to hear something from the McGuire family had been answered. "What is it?" Mac smiled. "Spencer's police chief is now ready to talk." Chapter 5. The Spencer Police Department resembled a mountain sports club. The offices were housed in a 3-story log building on the lake with a boat launch and dock. The cruisers were all-wheel drive SUVs in order to make their way up and down the mountain, both on and off the road. The department also had 4 speedboats and a fleet of jet skis for patrolling the lake. A fire was roaring in the stone fireplace in the reception area when Mac arrived for his meeting with David. The desk clerk, Tanya, had lived on the lake her whole life. Many suspected the long hours she put in at the station were an excuse to not go home, to which 2 of her 3 grown children had returned with their offspring after a short time spent in the outside world. Tanya greeted Mac with her usual toothy grin and asked about life at the manor, Archie and Gnarly. Sometimes Mac felt like she was simply going through the paces while making small talk until they arrived upon the topic of Gnarly and his latest escapades. She had 3 dogs of her own that she clearly loved more than her kids. The dogs were more self-sufficient and independent. On this visit, Tanya was unable to resist asking for the lowdown on Gnarly's bone theft. "When are you going to bring Gnarly in for his mug shots?" she asked with a laugh. "Depending on what progress David is making on his investigation. Maybe Gnarly and I can both get fingerprinted and photographed at the same time," Mac replied. "You think they'll let us share a cell?" When he stepped to the back of the reception area to go upstairs to David's corner office, she stopped him. "The chief wants you to meet him in the conference room." Mac cringed. He winced a second time when she asked if he would mind turning in the semi-automatic he wore concealed under his shirt. In all the times that he'd visited David at the station, he'd never been asked to check his weapon. While he wasn't completely up to speed on how the Spencer police did things, Mac was familiar enough with procedure to know that interrogations took place in the conference room where they could be recorded. He half wished that he didn't know as much as he did about the workings behind the scenes of a murder investigation. Tanya escorted him to the room he'd suspected he would be interrogated in. It had a 2-way mirror and a hidden camera built into the intercom. "Would you like a soda?" she asked, before leaving to return to the front desk. The mention of the soft drink made him realize how thirsty he was. At the same time, he was too offended to appreciate her offer. This meeting wasn't going to be a friendly little sit-down. It couldn't be. The media was all over Deep Creek Lake covering the murders in the penthouse belonging to Robin Spencer's son. The story was too juicy not to cover. Even though his statement had been taken and evidence collected, journalists were still asking, "Has Mac Faraday been questioned yet? Is he a suspect?" If David didn't formally question the media's prime suspect, then when the real killer was found, the defense attorney would quickly lay the groundwork for an acquittal with insinuations of police cover-up. The fact that Mac was the direct descendant of the town's founders was enough. If it became public knowledge that the police chief was his half-brother, then the media would have the town council screaming for David's badge. Even with no cover-up, the appearance of an impropriety would be enough grounds to fire him. David had to question Mac, and he had no choice but to do it by the book. Still, Mac couldn't help feeling insulted. His first instinct was to sit at the table with his back to the camera. Reminding himself of why this interview had to take place, he took the chair of honor facing the camera in the 2-way mirror. Looking at his reflection, Mac wondered if Ben Fleming, the prosecuting attorney, was waiting in the room next door to observe the interrogation. So far, all he'd heard from Ben was a phone call urging Mac to let him know if he needed anything. Mac wondered if the McGuire family had been talking to the county prosecutor instead of Jeff. Mac wished he was on the other side of the mirror, looking in. Now he was going to find out what it felt like to sit on this side of the table. So far, he didn't like it. "Hey, Mac," David called out when he came in. In one hand he carried a coffee mug. In the other he had the root beer Mac had requested from Tanya. A bag of doughnuts hung from the fingertips of the hand grasping the soft drink. "Have you had breakfast yet?" Having eaten Archie's croissants and the French toast, Mac clutched his stomach. "Sorry, I'm stuffed." David held a brown accordion folder, so thick that it threatened to drop out from where he'd pressed it against his ribs with an elbow. After tossing the folder onto the table, David set the root beer in front of Mac, before placing a doughnut from the bag in front of his place. He then went back out into the hallway and called out, "Anybody want some doughnuts? We have plenty." Alone with the accordion folder that obviously contained files, Mac's curiosity took hold. He wondered what the collection of files had to do with Christine's and McGuire's murders. He saw that there was a yellow notepad under the brown folder. "This case has me running around all over town," David announced when he came back into the interrogation room. "I've been living on fast food." "Well, murder cases are like that," Mac said. "You'll get used to it." "I hope you don't mind if I eat while we do this." The police chief took a bite out of his doughnut and chewed before washing it down with a gulp of his coffee. Both grateful and suspicious about his pleasant nature, Mac eyed the thick folder that David had shoved to the side. "What's that?" "Just some case files." After taking a big bite from the doughnut, he wiped his mouth with a paper napkin, opened his leather-bound notepad, and took out his pen. Unfortunately, the DNA from the skin under Christine's fingernails wasn't viable. There was bleach all over that room, and the medical examiner thinks her hands were soaked or wiped down with it. Forensics didn't get any usable DNA. Then the DNA you collected from me was useless. Of course you're aware that bleach destroys DNA. David spoke around another bite of his doughnut. If that was your skin under her fingernails, we can't prove it. You also can't clear me, Mac said. If I was going to kill Christine and McGuire, the last place I'd have done it would have been my private suite. Every cable news station around has been at the inn asking when I'm going to be arrested. They've been hounding Willingham for a statement, which he won't give. Do you think I like being under a microscope? Do you think I enjoy getting calls from my daughter, crying because one of her friends asked if her daddy flipped out and killed her mother? If you can't use DNA to clear my name, then I'll do it the old-fashioned way. Even as the words came out of his mouth, Mac regretted allowing his temper to slip. He thought of how many suspects who had spouted similar declarations of innocence that he had ignored. My dad didn't raise no dummy. With a chuckle, David referred to his notes. My officers have questioned everyone at and around the Spencer Inn. No one saw you. Of course, since you're the boss, your employees could be lying. I wasn't there. Hector voluntarily handed over the security tapes immediately, the originals. Of course, he made copies for the inn's own investigation. Forensics confirmed that they haven't been edited. You aren't on them anywhere after checking Christine in, nor did your access card get used. Then I'm cleared. Were you that quick to clear a suspect when you were a detective? David asked. Mac didn't want to admit that he wasn't. You have enough money that you could have paid to have it done. Even though David's tone was casual, Mac picked up a serious note to it. What would be my motive? He asked. Christine did make a bid for part of my inheritance, but the judge laughed her out of court. We were through. I moved on. Calm down, David told him. We took a look at your financials, with a warrant, of course. There's no suspicious withdrawals or transfers that look like they went to pay for a hit, the police chief concluded. I know you didn't do this, but you aren't the only one that's had people breathing down your neck. The town council ordered me to haul you in here in the back of a cruiser for the media to see, to prove that we aren't crooked and you didn't own Spencer's law enforcement. I wouldn't do it. But I still had to do all I could to look at this from every angle before I could scratch your name off my list. With a stroke of his pen across the notepad, David put a line through Mac's name. I appreciate that, Mac replied. As long as I'm sitting in your hot seat, can you make it worth my while? Tell me what you do have on Christine's murder. TOD is 10:30, David recounted from his notes in his case file. You need a key card to go anywhere in the hotel except the general public areas. Security doesn't register when a guest opens the door from the inside the room to let someone else in. It only registers when the key card is used. Based on the evidence we've collected and what we know, Christine had stayed in the suite after you left and never went anywhere, or even used the phone in her room. Her cell records indicate that she had called her sister, Roxanne Burton, shortly after you checked her in, around 5:30, to tell her about her spending the night at your penthouse. Did you get a statement from Roxanne? David leafed through some reports before stopping to tap his pen on the statement Mac was talking about. Roxanne told us that Christine had been depressed ever since McGuire left her a few weeks ago. Roxanne suggested that she come out here to a lake house they have to clear her head. She came out on Thursday, which happens to be the same day Stephen McGuire checked into the Spencer Inn. Roxanne swears it was only a coincidence. Mac was startled. I never knew Christine was here. I thought she'd come out the same day that she showed up at my house. She was in Spencer, David said, at 6:37, according to hotel records. Christine ordered 2 filet mignon dinners and a bottle of red wine from room service, which was delivered at around 7. The server said Christine was alone when he delivered the dinners. Shortly after 8 o'clock, her cell records show a series of calls to Stephen McGuire's cell. He was having dinner with a woman who we have yet to identify in the restaurant. The dinner ended between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. Security records indicate he used his key card to go up to his floor and enter his room around that time. Meanwhile, from 8 o'clock on, Christine kept calling his cell every 10 to 15 minutes for over 2 hours, until McGuire finally called her back at around 10:15. They spoke for 4 minutes. He used his key card to take the elevator up to the penthouse floor at around 10:30, at which time he was killed. After setting down his pen, David folded his hands on top of the folder. Did Christine speak Spanish? Mac replied, Hector told me you suspect she was stalking Stephen McGuire. Then you know about the black wig and Spencer Inn cleaning service smock we found in Christine's room. David popped the last bite of his donut into his mouth and washed it down with coffee. The inn's security videos have footage of a woman in a black wig who seems to be following McGuire while he was there. Employees who encountered her said she knew very little English. I can't believe Christine would kill anyone, Mac argued. David said if she had summered here at the lake throughout the years, she would know what she needed to do in order to mix in with inn employees so that she could follow him. McGuire did ruin her life. According to her sister, a couple of weeks ago she filed a petition to have Christine declared mentally incompetent. I don't want my children to think their mother was a lunatic, Mac insisted. She was an alcoholic, and she'd made some very bad decisions, but someone went to a lot of trouble to make this happen. David sat forward in his seat. Maybe Christine was stalking McGuire, but someone else was in that room. We found a black wig in her things. It had her hair and epidermal cells in it. She wore it. We also found black hairs from a wig in Stephen McGuire's blood and caught in a class ring he was wearing. Whoever attacked him, stabbed him 27 times, was wearing a black wig. But it wasn't the wig Christine had in her suitcase. The way the blood was splattered in that attack, the wig would have gotten some on it. There was no blood in the wig we found, and it hadn't been washed. Max said, That proves Christine didn't kill McGuire. She got into a fight with someone besides McGuire, David said. He had defensive wounds, but no scratches. Also, Christine died of a cervical fracture that she didn't get in the shower tub. She didn't fall and hit her head on the towel rack. Her blood alcohol level was .26, plus she had enough Valium in her to kill an elephant. It's unbelievable she was even conscious, David marveled. Her head wound didn't match with the towel rack or anything else in the shower tub, but it does match with the corner of the sink. We believe she got into a fight with whoever was cleaning up the bathroom after Stephen McGuire's murder. The killer had to have been covered in blood after stabbing him 27 times, Mac agreed. With all the alcohol and drugs in her system, Christine had to be unconscious. The killer put on her clothes, kills McGuire in order to get his blood on Christine's clothes and make it look like she'd done it. Christine comes to while the killer is getting rid of the evidence and attacks the killer, getting skin under her fingernails. Christine falls and hits her head. The medical examiner said she died instantly. He added in a soft voice, "She didn't suffer." That's good to know. The killer put Christine's body in the tub to make it look like she'd killed McGuire and then had an accident while cleaning it up. David folded his hands on top of his notepad. "Tell me about Stephen McGuire." "Now, if you're any type of detective, you've already found out all about Stephen McGuire," Mac countered. "I want to know what you know about him." He was a bastard," Mac said. "He broke up my family." "Didn't you two work together?" "Yes." Mac swallowed in hopes of keeping down the anger that he still felt rising inside his chest when he talked about Stephen McGuire. "He was an assistant U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia. I worked with him on some murder cases. In my personal opinion, the only reason he got as far as he did was because he was a McGuire." "I'm not up on the social register," confessed David. "Neither was I till I had the displeasure of working with Stephen McGuire," Mac said. "In the 20-odd years that I was a homicide detective, I got to know a lot of U.S. attorneys. Some were okay, others were great. McGuire wasn't either, because his great-grandfather was Everett McGuire." "And that's important because—" Mac chuckled. "You really aren't into high society goings-on." "All bastards look the same to me, no matter who their daddy is." "Everett McGuire was a Supreme Court justice 100 years ago," Mac explained. "He was a blue blood off of the Mayflower, or something like that. He had 8 children. Half of them went on to become self-made millionaires. The other half married into millions. They all went into high society and became movers and shakers about town. Broderick McGuire went into real estate, and by the 1940s owned half of D.C. Now he's a billionaire. He had 7 kids. I think he has like 50 grandkids and a dozen great-grandchildren." He held up his hands as if he was going to count up the McGuire family on his fingers. "And that isn't counting Broderick's brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews. The McGuires own high society in the United States Capitol." "And Stephen McGuire was one of them?" David asked, while referring to a report from his case file. "What McGuire lacked in legal know-how, he made up for in arrogance and political pull," Mac said. "He never let anyone forget about his family connections. The judge who presided over my divorce had a son who wanted to get into the same fraternity at George Washington University that McGuire and his family had belonged to. She buried me. The kid got in." David's expression was one of genuine confusion while he sipped his coffee. Mac finished off his root beer. Seeing his reflection in the mirror, he remembered that they were being watched and was surprised that he'd forgotten. He guessed that David had appointed his deputy, Bogey, to do the honors. "Has the crime scene been cleared yet?" Mac asked. Ignoring his question about the crime scene, David said, "I was hoping you could clear up some things, but instead I'm more confused." Mac cringed again. He thought of how many times he'd started interrogations with the pleasant request that the suspect clear up some confusion. He reminded himself that David had said he was cleared as a suspect. David removed the 2 reports from his folder. "I'm sure you know that it's SOP to run background and credit checks on murder victims." He turned the report around for Mac to review. "Christine was in hock up to her eyebrows. Did you know that?" "Ed told me about it yesterday. Apparently my ex-wife was living large." "Did Ed tell you about the state of Stephen McGuire's finances?" "He had no reason to check on McGuire's finances," Mac said. Turning the second report around, David asked, "How long were McGuire and Christine together?" "Couple of years." David held the paper down with his hand over the top. "This is where I get confused. The way Jeff is acting, you'd think McGuire was Prince William, complete with the silver spoon still in his mouth. But that's not what I see here." He slid the report across the table to Mac. The personal and financial report read quite differently from what Mac had expected. As Mac had expected, the report showed that Stephen Douglas McGuire was a lawyer with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia. He was also a graduate of George Washington University Law School. Mac was surprised to find that before law school, Stephen McGuire had in fact received his bachelor's in political science from Ohio State University. He swore that someone had told him that McGuire had received his bachelor's from Oxford University. Mac was still scratching his head over that when David gave him the rundown. McGuire was nowhere near in debt. On the contrary, he'd made some good investments and had substantial money in various accounts. He's made large deposits, got a condo in Hilton Head and a boat. He's got a Hummer and a BMW, all registered in his name. According to Christine's credit report, the lease for the Beamer is in her name. He got the car. She got the payment book. Sweet, Mac noted with sarcasm. His most recent investment was some commercial property right here on Deep Creek Lake. Mac felt his blood pressure jumping up a notch. Here? Sully's, over on the other side of the lake, David explained. The perfect establishment for lakeside dining. Mac knew the property. Sully's had been a lakeside restaurant and lounge. The outdoor patio was adjacent to boat docks that allowed customers to dock their boats and jet skis in order to relax for dinner or a cocktail before going back out onto the water. Mac and Archie had eaten there once before it was foreclosed on and the property put up for sale. It was located directly across the lake from Spencer Point. How would you feel about Stephen McGuire, the man your wife traded you up for, opening a restaurant and watering hole directly across the lake from you? David asked. You'd see his place first thing in the morning when you got up, and his joint would be the last thing you'd see before going to bed at night. I had no idea McGuire was moving out here, Mac argued. Why would he? He was on the fast track with the prosecutor's office when I left Georgetown. Don't worry, I believe you, David said in a calm voice. It was a surprise to me, too. I knew the bank had sold the property. I didn't know who to. Without exerting any effort to conceal the information from Mac, he studied the reports in his file. From across the table, Mac read upside down the list of known addresses for Stephen McGuire. He had moved many times over the course of the last several years. McGuire was well-to-do, but his finances didn't look like what you'd expect of someone descended from billionaires and millionaires, David said. He had money. He was worth about $1.5 million. But from what I see in their credit reports, that's because they were living off Christine's money while he was socking his away. His grandfather was Broderick McGuire, Mac argued. Who were his parents? David asked. Mac's mind went blank. As he thought back over the years that Stephen McGuire had been in his life, he realized he'd never asked, and was never told, who McGuire's parents were. He didn't care. He was only reminded when he felt like decking McGuire that he was a member of D.C.'s unofficial royal family. David recalled some friends who had come from affluent families who weren't allowed free access to their parents' fortunes. There's many wealthy families that insist their kids earn their own way. They want to teach them the value of a dollar. He went on to tell of two brothers with whom he had attended school, who became drug dealers when their parents insisted they earn their own money. Think about it, David said. The parents made their fortune before they had these kids. All they saw was Mom and Dad hobnobbing with the rich and making business deals over cocktails, or while playing golf. Then they're told that they need to learn how to work hard. Thing is, all they knew how to do was use their charm to make big money. Working hard was a foreign concept to them. Now these two guys I know are spending life in prison for 2 murders instead of hitting golf balls at the inn. He suggested, maybe that's what happened with Stephen McGuire. Are you trying to make me feel sorry for him? Mac gritted his teeth so hard that his jaw hurt. From what you're telling me, Stephen McGuire worked hard and earned his own way by living off his mistresses. One of the oldest games in the book, David explained. I believe the name for men like McGuire is gigolo. Then, once the money runs out, he tapped his copy of the credit report on Christine. Like it did for your ex-wife, he moves on to a fresher target. Kind of like one of those vampires you were watching with Gnarly the other night. After I moved out, they went on cruises, Mac recalled. They spent New Year's Eve in Paris. A quick check of the report confirmed that Christine had paid for the trip via credit card. I thought at the time that it was McGuire's money they were spending. He glanced down at Christine's credit report. Her rating had fallen like a boulder in 2 short years. He shoved the report across the table so hard that it flew over the police chief's shoulder. "Bastard," David reminded him. "That bastard was staying in your inn the night he was killed. I didn't know he was there until Christine attacked him while I was checking her in." David leaned across the table toward him. "Why did you take her there? The manor has 7 bedrooms. Why didn't you let her stay there with you?" "Because I didn't want her to stay there with me," Mac argued. "You saw her. Christine wanted to reconcile, and I didn't. If I'd let her spend the night, especially in the frame of mind she was in, it would have given her some glimmer of hope that I'd take her back, and I didn't want her to have that hope." David asked. "And you had no idea that Stephen McGuire was going to be at the inn at the same time?" "I know it sounds like a very big coincidence, but that's what it was. Anything other than that I'm unaware of." Mac thought about how many times suspects had said those exact same words to him, and he didn't believe them. David referred to his notes. "Jeff told me this isn't the first time Stephen McGuire has stayed at the inn." "With Christine?" Mac wondered if his ex-wife had come to the manor intending for him to take her to the inn in order to make McGuire jealous. "No," David answered. "Jeff swears he'd never seen her there before, but he could be mistaken. The inn has thousands upon thousands of guests a year. However, he's positive that McGuire has never been at the inn with Christine." He tapped a page of his notes with the tip of his pen. "Jeff told me that McGuire came to the inn regularly, always during ski season, always with different women. He always booked a deluxe suite with a view of the lake." "It's not ski season yet." Mac leaned across the table to decipher the upside-down words in the police chief's notes. "What's different about this visit is that McGuire booked a basic suite at the last minute, during the height of the leaf peeper season. He was willing to take whatever he could get," David added. "He also came alone." Mac recalled. "There was a woman with him the afternoon before the murders. Maybe she's local and he met her here. Any idea on the woman?" "Not yet," David said. "My officers are showing her picture from the security cameras around the inn to see if anyone knows her. No evidence in the room suggests that he had someone staying with him. Forensics did find vaginal fluid on his sheets and working up a DNA profile on her. Could be the same woman you saw him with. The desk clerk says he was alone when he checked in and paid with a federal credit card. Any idea what case he may have been working on?" David shook his head. "I left the police department 5 months ago." "What about cases that were still open when you left?" David suggested. "They were all passed on to other investigators." "How about cases that hadn't gotten to trial yet?" There were a couple, but McGuire wasn't the prosecutor on record for those cases," Mac said. "I wasn't the only homicide detective in Georgetown. He could have been working on other detectives' cases." "I don't think so," David said. "I think McGuire was on a business trip, and I think it was one of your cases." He removed the yellow notepad from where it had been hiding under the accordion folder and slid it across the table to land in front of Mac. "This was found in McGuire's room next to this folder." At the top of the notepad on the first line in block capital letters was the word THEMIS. The lines below read, VM Emma Wilkes, Re Dillon Booth. Number of cases. How far back? ? 2 lines below the note was the notation that Mac sensed had captured the police chief's interest. Call M. Faraday? ? "What's Themis?" David asked. "I have no idea," Mac told him. Emma Wilkes might be the woman we saw McGuire with. She may also be the one who slipped between his sheets." David said, "The same thought occurred to me. Jeff says there's no one registered at the inn by that name. What about Dillon Booth?" "Dillon Booth was one of my cases." David sat back in his seat and pressed his palms and fingertips against each other. "Tell me about him." "A law clerk I accused McGuire of killing," Mac said. "That was before he slept with my wife." "What interest would McGuire have in a law clerk?" Mac told him, "I have no doubt in my mind but that McGuire was capable of murder, and the evidence made him a suspect." "Do you mean like the other man being found dead in your private suite?" David asked. "Touché," Mac replied. "I was certain McGuire was involved in something dirty having to do with this clerk, but I couldn't place him at the crime scene. Plus, I came up blank finding out what the dirty deal was. I came up with nothing." While David sipped his cold coffee, Mac went on. "Dillon Booth worked for Judge Randolph Daniels, one of the most influential judges in D.C. He was in his last year of law school. One Saturday, someone shot him in the parking lot when he was leaving his office. On the surface, it looked like a robbery. His wallet and watch were missing." "What made you think it wasn't?" "The security guard at the building said that when Booth left, he was carrying a folder box and that it was heavy. That was missing along with Booth's laptop." "What was in the box? Case files?" David drew his attention to the note in McGuire's notepad about the number of cases. "We assume so. Neither the laptop or box have been located." "Why would someone steal case files unless there was something incriminating in them?" David wondered. "Did you ask the judge's staff if anything was missing from their records?" "I'd been a detective for a very long time," Mac reminded him, with a grin. "The staff said nothing was missing. Maybe the judge—" "Would you believe the judge had committed suicide the night before?" "Really?" The expression on David's face was one of instant suspicion. Mac cleared that thought from his mind. Judge Daniels was 84 years old. His doctor diagnosed him with brain cancer. He went home and said nothing. That night, after his wife went to bed, went down to his study and blew his brains out with a Colt revolver. "Any possibility of—" "Nope," Mac interrupted. "He left a suicide note saying that he'd rather go out with a bang than chemo. Everyone who knew him said that was his style. There was absolutely no connection." "If it weren't for this note, I'd think Booth went to the office to clean out his stuff because he knew that he was out of a job with no judge to clerk to. The box had his desk stuff in it." "I don't think so," Mac argued. "Stephen McGuire was the last person Booth spoke to minutes before someone blew his brains out. He claimed Booth called him to ask for a recommendation for his application to the U.S. Attorney's Office." "But you didn't believe that?" David said. "It was Saturday afternoon. People don't call lawyers' offices for job interviews on Saturdays. We never found any other suspects, and the case went cold. It always bugged me, maybe because I knew in my gut that McGuire was involved and got away with it." He looked down at the notepad resting between his hands. "This proves I was right." "Or wrong," David said. "McGuire made that note to call you, unless there's another M. Faraday you think he knows. At least he was thinking about calling you. Maybe he found evidence to prove that he wasn't involved and wanted to call you to tell you who was." Mac concluded, "And that someone killed him and Christine." Chapter 6. "You going to show me what's in there?" Mac asked about the accordion folder that had been taunting him during the interview with the police chief. "Since McGuire made a note to call you, maybe you can shed some light on it." David shoved the folder across the table in his direction. Mac studied the front of the folder. One word was written in thick black marker with block lettering across the front. Themis. Themis. "Could Themis be the name of a victim from one of your cases?" David asked him. "You said that you've investigated well over 100 murders." "I never forget the name of a victim," Mac said. When you take on the responsibility of finding out who killed someone, you never forget their name or their face." He shook his head. "I've never run into the name Themis." He opened the folder sealed shut with a rubber band. Inside, a single sheet of paper rested on top of 4 files. "Where did you find this?" he asked David. "On the table next to the window in his suite," he replied. "We found a mini laptop, his cell phone, pen, and his car keys next to the notepad. It looked like he'd been working on something when he finally decided to answer Christine's calls and went up to the penthouse to get killed." A list of names was written out in longhand. Freddie Gibbons, Sid Baxter, Jillian Keating, Leo Samuels, Gerald Hogan, Douglas Probst. Mac turned the paper around so he could read it. "It's a list of killers. Most of these cases I've worked on." He tapped the 4th name with his finger. "I arrested Leo Samuels. He was a pimp and drug dealer on his way up. I got some kid to kill a girl he'd snatched from Union Station who refused to go to work for him, even after he'd raped her and beat her to a pulp. The kid rolled on Samuels, then got knifed in jail before the trial. The guy was a monster. Not an ounce of remorse." Seeing that the case still got under Mac's skin, David said, "I take it by the look on your face that he got off. His lawyer got everything suppressed since the kid wasn't alive to testify. According to everything that I got on Samuels, it wasn't the first time. He knew the way the system worked, inside and out. The guy was smarter than some lawyers I know," he sighed. "But for all his smarts, it didn't do him any good. Less than 6 months later, he was dead, and another gang member took his place in the hierarchy." David said, "Sometimes I wonder why we bother wasting our time." Studying the label on the top file, Mac opened the cover and read the first sheet of paper. It was a letter. "Look at this." He held it out to David. "What is it?" "It's a letter from the police in Paris." Mac explained the contents. "It says that according to the results of a DNA test made at McGuire's request, they have positively identified John Doe found in a hostel in Paris as Frederick Gibbons, Jr." David spun the folder around to view the discovery. "Isn't that the rapist and killer that skipped the country less than an hour after the grand jury indicted him? The one that McGuire blamed on you for letting him escape. He's dead?" Retrieving the report taken from him, Mac flipped the cover letter to study the sheet underneath. "This letter is from a private investigator hired by Gibbons's father to look for him." "Didn't Gibbons fly out on his father's jet?" Mac was still reading the private investigator's report. "A couple of months after they'd helped their son to escape, he disappeared. Their private investigator found an American John Doe matching Freddie's description, murdered, execution style, round the time he stopped communicating with his parents." "What would this have to do with Stephen McGuire's murder?" "Gibbons was killed only a couple of months after he got away," Mac said slowly. "Maybe it was payback. Everybody on the inside knows McGuire was behind Gibbons's escape. It turns out Frederick Gibbons Sr. and McGuire were friends. They used to be roommates in law school." David almost spit out his coffee. "And McGuire didn't remove himself from the case?" The police chief's shock amused Mac, who'd seen more incidents of unfair politics played out in the justice system than he cared